At the beginning of everything, there was only chaos. There were already the elements of what would form the universe, but they were completely mixed, in a massive absence of meaning. This original chaotic period lasted for many ages. Gaia, the Mother Earth, emerged from this primordial chaos, a goddess whose main characteristic was her extreme fertility. The goddess Gaia gave birth to our planet and personified all the earth that covers the world. She gave birth to several primordial deities, such as Pontus, the god of the sea, and Aureus, the deity of the mountains. Gaia gave birth to the god Uranus, a supreme being who would personify heaven, reigning over all things. Uranus made Gaia his wife. During the night, Nyx, the goddess of the night, also emerged from chaos. She crossed the heavens every day, covering it with her black mountain. At dusk, Uranus and Gaia united. The fruits of this union quickly began to hatch. The goddess gave birth to creatures with dreadful features, including Hecatoncheirus, monsters with 100 arms and several heads, and the Cyclops, powerful one-eyed beings. Uranus and Gaia also gave birth to a new generation of gods, powerful beings who would become known as Titans. The celestial god, when he saw the powerful offspring he had begotten, began to fear being dethroned by them, so he took action. Uranus threw all his children into Tartarus, a dark place in the depths of the earth. Appalled, the Titans beat the walls of Tartarus with violence, trying to escape. They were trapped in Gaia's womb. The revolt of creatures that were so powerful provoked an intense pain in their mother, who suffered terrible aches. Gaia couldn't stand that situation and decided to conspire against her husband. The goddess asked one of her children to destroy Uranus, but all the Titans rejected, except Kronos, the most ambitious, who thought he could perform that task. Kronos receives a scythe made of diamond and headed to the heavens wielding that weapon. In the celestial residence of Uranus, Kronos found the supreme god sleeping on a cloud. With a sharp stroke of his sickle, the Titan castrated his father. Uranus's cry of pain was heard throughout the universe. The skies were painted bright red, the blood of Uranus. Uranus's testicles were thrown into the ocean, and giving their fertilizing abilities, several deities emerged in the waters. Cronus triumphantly returned and freed his imprisoned brothers. As the great hero of the revolt, he was hailed as the new supreme lord of the universe. Cronus didn't free the Hecatoncheirus, nor the Cyclops, because he considered them very dangerous. They remained in Tartarus. After the banquet, the new sovereign was visited by his father's specter, which revealed to him a terrible prophecy. He said that, like his father, who had been dethroned by an infamous descendant, Cronus would also lose the supreme throne, overthrown by his own son in a terrible fate. Cronus reigned supreme over the universe, after dethroning his father and liberating the Titans. Like his father, the god Uranus, Cronus began a tyrannical reign over the world. With the support of the Titans, he had no rival. But, despite having supreme power, the Titan lived tormented by the curse invoked by his father, who said that one of his sons would be responsible for his fall. Cronus was willing to do anything to prevent that outcome. The sovereign was married to Titanide Rhea, a divinity loved and adored by all. The queen of the Titans soon had her first daughter, awakening in Cronus his most monstrous side. Rhea gave birth to a new kind of divinity that seemed superior to the previous generation. The Titan asked to grab his first daughter, named Hestia, one of the most loving deities ever. But in the child's eyes, Cronus saw his terrible future. A hideous impulse caused the Titan to devour his daughter. Cronus would take the newborns from the arms of their mother, who helplessly tried to prevent the tyrant from devouring one more of her children. She begged in vain, but could not soften the hard heart of the Titan. The children were successively devoured. But Rhea promised herself she wouldn't allow that monster to devour another of her children. The queen got pregnant again, but had a plan to save her baby from her terrible husband. Rhea would hide in a cave on the island of Crete, where she intended to give birth away from Cronus. She gave birth to a beautiful child who had incredible power. Rhea felt that the women of destiny had woven a glorious future for her son, who received the name Zeus. Rhea left her son in the care of the nymphs and Corybants, who beat their shields hard to muffle the sound of the powerful cry of the divine baby. The queen wrapped a stone in a cloak and took it to her husband. Cronus was waiting for her, ready to devour another child, and received the false baby delivered by Rhea. Cronus swallowed the stone without blinking, while the queen cried on the ground. But this time, the tears were not of sadness, but of emotion in saving her son's life. On the island of Crete, Zeus was breastfed with the milk of the Amalthea goat, strengthening himself every day. Zeus was informed of all that was happening in the world by a powerful eagle, which would become his sacred bird. The god grew into a powerful deity, ready to fulfill his destiny. As an adult, Zeus was unexpectedly visited by Metis, a wise deity, who gave him a decisive gift for his journey. Metis revealed to Zeus the terrible fate of his brothers, imprisoned in the stomach of the Titan. But with a potion, Zeus could free the other gods. Zeus, in disguise, went to Mount Orthris, the fortress of the Titans. There he offered the potion to Cronus, promising that the solution was a delightful delicacy. Cronus felt invincible and did not believe that anyone would dare to plan something against him, so he accepted the potion. The Titan drank all of the solution that tasted different, but Cronus quickly began to feel nauseous. The mighty Titan vomited all his children: Hestia, Hera, Demeter, Hades, and Poseidon. They were already adults and had a desire for revenge. Cronus also vomited the stone that deceived him. With his brothers at his side, Zeus led a revolt that would change the fate of the universe. After releasing his relatives from the stomach of Titan Cronus, Zeus guided his brothers to the top of Mount Olympus, the highest mountain in Greece. It was there that the headquarters of the rebel gods would be established, who would fight against the tyranny of the Titans. This rebellion gave rise to the Titanomachy, better known as the War of the Titans. On his throne on Mount Orthris, Cronus summoned all his Titan allies to the great battle. The general of Cronus's army was the Titan Atlas, who would lead the attacks against the Olympic gods. The plains of the Thessaly region were the battlefield between the armies of the gods and the Titans. The Titans began to impose themselves on the gods because of their immense physical power. Zeus, aware of the power of the army of the Titans, went looking for reinforcements in Tartarus. He freed the strange one-eyed creatures known as Cyclops. These, in a gesture of gratitude, forged formidable weapons for the gods. Zeus received his famous and powerful lightning bolt. Poseidon was gifted a majestic trident capable of creating earthquakes and tsunamis, and Hades the helm of terror, which gave him invisibility. With the new weapons, the gods managed to face the huge titans. Cronus' army threw whole mountains against the gods. The battle between the gods and the titans lasted almost 10 years, full of intense hand-to-hand combat, and the scale seemed to tip to the side of the titans. Zeus decided to free the fearsome Hecatoncheires of Tartarus, giants with 100 arms and 50 heads. The horrendous creatures had a decisive impact on the war. The army of Titans panicked when they came across those grotesque creatures. Zeus gathered all his power to give even more energy to his most powerful lightning bolt. This struck Cronus' head, and the impact of the blow shook the universe. The Titans were subdued and punished exemplarily. Cronus and his allies were condemned to a perpetual existence in Tartarus, the Hecatoncheires assuming the role of jailers. Zeus reserved a special punishment for the Titan Atlas, leader of the Titanic troops. He was condemned to bear the weight of the celestial sphere on his shoulders for all eternity. The Olympic gods now reigned supreme. Under the command of Zeus, a new order began in the universe. A great war broke out between divine beings in the dawn of time. Gods from different generations fought for supreme power over the universe. The oldest gods were known as Titans, deities of great size and power, ruled by the Titan Cronus. Cronus ruled over the universe tyrannically, ever since he castrated his father with his glorious scythe and usurped power from him. Fortified on the heights of Mount Olympus, the mighty Zeus and his brothers fought the tyranny of the Titans. In the Olympic forges, the Cyclops created mighty artifacts to aid the gods in their war against the Titans. Zeus was gifted with powerful thunderbolt, Poseidon received his glorious trident, and Hades was given the helmet of terror. The war between gods and titans became known as the Titanomachy, and for 10 years, the deities fought fierce battles. Zeus descended into the depths of Tartarus to meet the imprisoned and mighty Hecatoncheires, creatures with countless arms and several heads. These beings were brothers of the Titans, but even they feared their power, and that is why they kept them imprisoned in Tartarus. Zeus broke the chains that bound the creatures, and they pledged to fight alongside the gods. Helped by the Hecatoncheires, the Olympians managed to tip the scales of the conflict in their favor. Helped by his brothers, Zeus managed to subdue Cronus and brought the most powerful of the Titans to their knees. The vanquished army was sent to Tartarus, where the Titans would serve a life sentence. Zeus showed everyone Cronus' legendary sickle. This clearly showed that he was the new ruler of the universe. But Zeus wished to put an end to the tyrannical reigns the world had been witnessing, so he called Hades and Poseidon for a meeting. Zeus shared some of his power with his two brothers. Hades would be the ruler of the underworld, the region where the spirit of men headed after death. Poseidon was handed the seas and oceans, and from his underwater palace, he would rule the sea world. On the other hand, Zeus would reign over the heavens, ruling the universe from his throne on Olympus as the supreme god. After the major victory over the Titans, the gods built a glorious palace on top of Mount Olympus, which became the gods' dwelling. As time went on, new deities joined the original Olympians, each with their role in helping Zeus establish order in the world. But Deep within the earth, a dreadful force of chaos was emerging, whose sole intent was to end the reign of the Olympian gods. Gaia, the Mother Earth, was conceiving a creature of endless power to retaliate the gods' decision to imprison her Titan children in Tartarus. The earth opened up, and a powerful scream could be heard from the ocean depths, spreading terror in the hearts of all the marine beings that witnessed such a scene. The huge beast destroyed everything in its path, and chaos started to spread across Poseidon's domains. The god of the seas, witnessing his underwater temple being destroyed, was overcome by an unbridled fury and attacked the creature. Poseidon measured forces with the beast and realized how powerful the opponent was. Poseidon threw his trident with all his might, hitting the creature in the chest, pushing it away. Typhon dealt with a powerful strike that could subdue the mightiest of Titans. The glorious god of the seas had the beast at his feet and said that this was the fate of those who dared to oppose him. But, much to Poseidon's surprise, the creature had not yet been defeated. The beast grabbed the trident that was stuck in its chest and threw it at the god, who easily dodged it. But the monster's throw was only a red herring. He wanted to distract the god from the real blow that would follow. The god was grabbed by the monster and could not free himself from the tentacles that strangled him. Typhon slammed the god several times against the ground, knocking him unconscious. Poseidon was rescued by Delphin, his loyal dolphin, who took him away from the fight. From the Olympian heights, the gods watched the destruction expand into the world of men and decided that the beast would have to be stopped. Apollo, Artemis, and Ares grabbed their weapons and set off to face the creature. The twin gods hit the beast with their divine arrows. Benefiting from the distraction caused by his brothers, Ares jumped on Typhon's back and buried his spear in the beast. Typhon grabbed Ares and threw him violently against Artemis. The monster ripped out Ares' spear from his body, and then threw it like a dart at the sun god, piercing the god's shoulder. The divine trio had been easily defeated, and now the monster was heading for Mount Olympus. Typhon was now on his way to meet his fate, and all he wanted was to bring all the gods to their knees. The beast, nurtured by Gaia, had already defeated 4 of the most powerful gods. Ares, Apollo, and Artemis were defeated by Typhon. Not even the great and powerful Poseidon could stop him. When they saw that the monster was already climbing Mount Olympus, the deities panically fled the heavenly abode, disguised as animals, fleeing to Egypt. In the land of the pharaohs, the animals-shaped gods had their divinity recognized, and they began to be worshipped as gods. On Mount Olympus, only Zeus and his daughter Athena were left to face Typhon. The beast kept spewing flames as the goddess protected herself behind her sacred shield. Athena charged at the monster, trying to hit Typhon's heart. But the goddess was grabbed in midair and thrown against a pillar. Zeus tried to defend his favorite daughter by firing one of his thunderbolts, but he hopelessly watched the beast block his attack with ease. Zeus was struck by a powerful blow, and while he attempted to get back on his feet, he caught a glimpse of Cronus' scythe, the weapon capable of killing a god. Zeus wielded his father's weapon and wanted to put an end to Typhon. The god cut through the tentacles that tried to block his path and attempted to cut the monster's neck. Typhon dodged the strike and landed a powerful counterblow. Zeus, now wounded, dropped Cronus' scythe. Typhon grabbed the divine weapon, and the supreme god was completely at his mercy. The god was lifted from the ground by Typhon, who, using his scythe, ripped out Zeus's tendons. The supreme god was defeated, and Typhon treasured his victory. After having fulfilled his mission, Typhon shed his bestial form, exchanging it for an avatar that he thought was nobler for the new lord who would reign over the heavens. Without his tendons, Zeus was completely defenseless. Typhon commissioned his wife, Echidna the Serpent Woman, to protect the box that held Zeus's tendons. In the meantime, Zeus was chained in a humiliating way. But the god still had allies. Pan, the god of the wild, and Hermes, the light-footed messenger god, were trying to come up with a plan to rescue Zeus's tendons. The gods waited for Typhon to walk away from the tendons to move on with their plot. With his powerful shout, capable of generating panic in the bravest warrior, Pan drove Echidna into a state of confusion. At the same time, Hermes used all his speed to steal the precious box. As Pan attempted to distract the Serpent Woman, Hermes ran to Zeus to free him. The god broke the chains that imprisoned his father and gave him back his tendons. Zeus stood up again, and his heart was seized by the desire to have his revenge against Typhon. A lackey informed Typhon that Zeus had been rescued and was seeking revenge. Typhon was furious to discover that his prisoner had fled. Unsure of his fate, he decided to visit the Moirai, the women who weave the destiny of men and gods. They revealed to him that his re-encounter with Zeus was imminent, and that if nothing was done, his defeat would be inevitable. The Moirai gave him a fruit, telling him that it was a magical delicacy that would increase his power. But what Typhon didn't know is that the Moirai hated everything the monster stood for, since he was an agent of chaos while they upheld the order. They had poisoned the fruit offered to the monster. Typhon started to feel sick, and some of his strength drained away. That's when Zeus emerged for the ultimate showdown. The god and the monster measured forces. Thanks to the fruit of the Moirai, Zeus and Typhon fought on equal strength and power. But the monster's courage was shaken, noticing he no longer had superiority over his enemy. Zeus's confidence only grew as he realized his opponent's fear. Typhon noticed that his victory would not come by a fair fight and assumed his colossal form. Zeus dodged the attacks of the dangerous tentacles, making his enemy increasingly frustrated. The god realized that it was the moment to take back the initiative and attacked. The Lord of the Universe focused all his power in a single thunderbolt. The god fired his devastating thunderbolt at Typhon's head. The gigantic monster fell, but he was immortal, just like the gods. Zeus then made use of his divine strength and threw a huge mountain over Typhon. The creature was finally definitively defeated and imprisoned. The Olympian gods returned from Egypt and knelt before Zeus's throne, the god who had defeated the forces of chaos and established order in the universe. Under the massive mountain on the island of Sicily, the monster Typhon remains imprisoned. In his moments of fury, the beast makes the mountain spit fire and lava. This huge volcano is known as Etna, one of the world's most active. Thousands of years later, it is still possible to behold the fury of Typhon. The seawater surrounding the island of Cyprus was getting milder, seemingly ready for the beautiful scene about to happen. From the waters, the one to be deemed the most beautiful of all goddesses started to emerge. Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and love, daughter of Uranus, the god who had once reigned over the world, materialized upon a shell. After arriving at Mount Olympus, she was under the spotlight. The gods were delighted with the new arrival, who brightened the splendid abode of the gods even more. Zeus noticed that such beauty would be the source of quarrels and disharmony. After all, Aphrodite awakened lustful feelings and pure envy in the gods. To avoid chaos, Zeus decided to unite Aphrodite, the most beautiful goddess, with Hephaestus, a rustic-looking god. Aphrodite submitted herself to the desire of the ultimate god and united with the god of the forges. Despite his brutish appearance, Hephaestus was endearing to his wife. Using his talents, he made and covered his wife with the most beautiful jewels. However, the blacksmith god was always absent, as he spent great lengths of time working in his forge in the Etna volcano. In the meantime, the goddess of love struggled with loneliness. There was another god, known as Ares, the god of war, with a poor reputation. His unrestrained bursts of violence and thirst for blood turned him into a much feared individual by mortals, while also being repudiated by the gods. Even Zeus, his father, had no sympathy for the god of war. He picked Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, as his favorite. But one goddess failed to resist the reckless approach and bad boy manners of the god of war. Her name was Aphrodite. Eris had a perfect athletic build and was stunningly beautiful. In Aphrodite's eyes, this contrasted with the god Hephaestus, a rough-looking and crippled deity, after he fell from Olympus when he was just a baby. Aphrodite was tired of being that lonely. It was when the fiery goddess of love heard the arrival of Ares, who had returned from yet another one of his wars. Staring at that beautiful blood-drenched god, she got goosebumps, and she promptly offered herself to clean all that blood. Ares felt surprised. For a long time, not a single resident of Olympus showed him the slightest courtesy. The insinuating Aphrodite started her seduction ritual. Poor Ares didn't stand a chance against the powers of love. Hidden, the gods went through a night of fiery love, and from that day on, whenever Hephaestus went to work, Ares visited Aphrodite on her marriage bed. To avoid being spotted by Helios, the personification of the sun and the #1 gossiper among deities, Ares ordered Electryon to guard the door of Aphrodite's room, warning him if the sun ever came by. Hypnos, the god of sleep, had already noticed that something odd was happening between the couple, but he didn't want to be known as a snitch. The god of sleep then hit Electryon with an overwhelming need to sleep. He fell asleep and did not see the sun approaching. After waking up, Ares noticed that it was day already. The couple had surely been spotted by the sun. Enraged with Electryon, Ares decides to punish the negligent watchman, turning him into a rooster. From that day on, Electryon never stopped shouting just before the sun came up. The god Helios told Hephaestus everything he saw. He refused to believe in his wife's betrayal, but decided to set a trap just in case. "My beloved wife, I have a major job to do, and I will be gone for a week." As soon as Hephaestus went on his way, Ares jumped to the wife's bed. But this time, the adulterous couple would not get away with it. The god of forges had weaved a net so fine that it looked invisible, having put it on the bed. Right when the gods were doing it, the net fell on the couple, imprisoning them. The cuckold god called the other deities to witness the shameful scene. "Look at these traitors, caught in such a disgraceful situation. They can never leave my powerful net. They will remain imprisoned as punishment." Hermes looked at Apollo and said, "Apparently, Ares decided to devote himself to a different sort of battle, a more hand-to-hand thing, so to speak. Of all the punishments ever devised by the gods, being united with Aphrodite certainly must be unbearable. Poor Ares. All the gods started to laugh. Ashamed and humiliated, Hephaestus decided to repudiate his wife. From the union of Ares and Aphrodite were born Deimos, Phobos, and the beautiful Harmonia. At the beginning of time, the earth was ruled by the Titans, powerful deities who were the sons of the primordial gods. Prometheus was one of them, a deity as old as time itself, who could foresee the future. The Titan predicted the victory of the Olympic gods over the Titans during the Titanomachy, the great war between gods and Titans for supreme power. He did not oppose Zeus during the conflict, and escaped from being imprisoned in Tartarus together with the other Titans. When the conflict ended, Zeus ordered Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus to create and populate the land with the most diverse animals. The Titans had plenty of raw material, and while Epimetheus was molding every kind of creature, Prometheus coordinated the production process. Each animal was given a talent. The birds were given the ability to fly. The elephant was granted an enormous strength, and the talents were evenly distributed. Man was saved for the end. They wanted to do something special. However, after shaping man from clay, they realized that all talents had already been attributed to the other animals. Prometheus presented his work to the goddess Athena. She felt marveled by the Titan's work and decides to bless it with the divine breath. This is how humanity came to be. But Prometheus was not happy with the result. He wanted man to stand out over all animals. He was just a smarter monkey. Man lived in caves, dodging every kind of animal, subsisting on fruits that dropped on the ground, fearing and dreading darkness. Athena advises Prometheus to introduce fire to man. With the sunset, the Titan headed to Helios's carriage, which was waiting for a new dawn. Prometheus lit the torch that would be given to humanity. With fire, man started to develop rapidly. Weapons and tools were created, and man began to dominate nature. Prometheus was finally happy. He was humanity's good maker. Watching the blooming of this new creature, Zeus decreed that they would honor the gods by offering sacrifices. But Prometheus interceded on behalf of humanity, preventing his creation from being exploited. Prometheus was very clever and attempted to deceive the god on behalf of men. Prometheus asked for a bull to be sacrificed to the gods. The product of the sacrifice would be split into two piles. One was smaller, but contained the best meats, covered by the animal's skin. The other pile was bigger, but it only contained bones and entrails. These were wrapped in fat, which made the offering look attractive. The cunning Prometheus knew that Zeus's ambition would make him choose the bigger pile, while man would have the best part. And he was right. Realizing that he had been tricked, Zeus was furious with those who had deceived him and decided to take the fire out of the hands of humanity. Without the fire, mankind started to regress. They were again tormented by darkness and cold and could no longer cook their food. Outraged, Prometheus decided to steal the sacred fire and give it back to man. During the night, he went to Olympus and returned with the flame stolen from Hephaestus's forges. With the re-establishment of fire dominance, mankind was thriving once more. But the glowing flames attracted Zeus's attention during the night. Furious, the supreme god decided that Prometheus could not go unpunished, given his insolence. he imprisoned him on a rock in the Caucasus to endure eternal punishment for defying Zeus's decisions. But Prometheus's punishment wasn't simply life imprisonment. His torment would be terrible. Zeus decided that a dreadful bird would be responsible for devouring his liver, instigating immeasurable pain. Prometheus was an immortal titan. With that said, after being torn apart by the odious bird, his liver regenerated, just to be attacked again by the animal the next day. The Titan endured this punishment throughout many and painful years. Then, Zeus came down to earth and offered him freedom if he hid the knowledge of fire from man. As humanity's benefactor, Prometheus rejected the god's offer and decided to sacrifice himself for his creation. With that, humanity could prosper, thanks to Prometheus's martyrdom. At the beginning of time, the Titans Prometheus and Epimetheus were responsible for the creation of man. To foster the development of his creation, Prometheus promised to steal the sacred fire from the gods and give it to humanity. The Titan knew that he would not go unpunished from such a crime. Sooner or later he would be punished by the gods. He also knew that the fate of his brother and humanity was in danger, and he advised him, "Epimetheus, my dear brother, my misfortune will not be enough to tackle Zeus's wrath. Regardless of what may happen, don't ever accept any gifts from the gods. With that, our creation will be safe." Epimetheus welcomed the advice with gratitude and assured him that he would not accept any gift from the gods. Just as Prometheus had predicted, Zeus devised a plan against Epimetheus and humanity. The supreme god ordered Hephaestus to nurture the first woman. The crafty god created the most graceful of creatures. She was introduced to the gods, who granted her different gifts. Aphrodite gave her an unparalleled beauty. Hermes granted her the power of the word. The Charites adorned her with clothes and jewels. Pandora turned into a magnificent creature. Zeus ordered Hermes to deliver Pandora to Epimetheus as a gift. But first, he gave her a beautiful box, saying, "Take this gift from me and give it to men, but do not open it under any circumstances." Pandora was then introduced to Epimetheus. He was so dazed by the youngster's unsurmountable beauty that he forgot his brother's advice never to accept any gift from the gods. Epimetheus put Pandora in a room of his palace. She stood there, admiring the beautiful box she had brought as a gift from the gods. Pandora wondered what kind of gift could be inside, since the box itself was already stunning. She failed to resist her curiosity and decided to look inside. Pandora opened the box carefully. The naive young woman had no idea what was coming. A powerful pressure pushed Pandora away, and a black mist started to come out of the box. The mist contained all the evils that Prometheus had not nurtured in men. Until that moment, man was pure and lived in the Golden Age. There were no needs and no conflicts. It was a world of pure happiness. But the box liberated all sorts of evils that would plague humanity. Envy, cruelty, greed, disease, and hunger were now part of the world of men. Pandora unsuccessfully attempted to close the box. The girl noticed that every evil had come out of the box, but hope was found at the bottom. Hope gives strength to man not to give up his life when facing evils and obstacles that afflict him. With hope, Zeus managed to extend the punishment imposed on men indefinitely. Hera, the queen of the Olympian gods, was finally pregnant with Zeus's child. Feeling excited, the goddess imagined how beautiful her son would be. Her expectations were enormous, as he would be the son of the king and queen of heaven. However, the child was not what she imagined. Upon seeing her son for the first time, she was horrified. He was a hairy baby with rugged features, soot-covered dark skin, becoming even uglier as he cried. The mad goddess said that he was not her son and threw him into the ocean from the top of Olympus. The little god crashed violently into the ocean waters, but survived. However, he was crippled and limped for the rest of his life. Hephaestus was rescued by the ocean-side Thetis, who quickly became attached to the child, unlike the goddess Hera. Thetis took him to the island of Lemnos, where he grew up playing with volcanoes. From childhood, Hephaestus developed an unparalleled skill in the art of metallurgy. Using the heat of the volcanoes, he created the most powerful weapons and the most beautiful jewelry. The god came of age and decided to return to Olympus. He had produced a beautiful golden throne for his true mother, the goddess Hera. Upon seeing her strange son return, Hera felt chills run down her spine. But upon seeing the throne he brought with him, she quickly forgot her discomfort. She was pleased with the gift and was eager to try it on. The throne was divine, beautiful, and comfortable. However, as she tried to stand up, the goddess realized that she was bound to the throne, and no one seemed able to release her except Hephaestus, who knew the secret to freeing her. But to free her, he demanded that his mother and the court of Olympus stop treating him with contempt and accept him back into Olympus. Ashamed, the goddess accepted the demand and was freed, and began to treat him with due respect. Finally, Hephaestus made one last request, which shocked everyone present. He asked for permission to marry Aphrodite, the most beautiful of the goddesses. Zeus realized that, because of her enormous beauty, Aphrodite aroused passions among the beings of Olympus. Conflicts would emerge sooner or later. Therefore, even without consulting Aphrodite, Zeus forced her to marry Hephaestus to avoid future conflicts. The young Hephaestus came to be respected as a great deity. The god was a magnificent blacksmith. Among his greatest works were the sandals of Hermes, the armor of Achilles, and the bow and arrow of Eros. He was a divine artist. One of the most powerful deities in Greek mythology is Poseidon, the god of the seas. From his throne in his underwater palace, he exercised all his power over the seven seas. Along with his brothers Zeus and Hades, he defeated Kronos and his Titans during the infamous Titanomachy. The dominion of the seas was given to Poseidon. Hades ruled over the underworld, while Zeus was in charge of the sky. Poseidon, the god of the seas, was highly mercurial. In his bouts of rage, quakes and tsunamis were generated. To venture out to the seas could be a way of life with no return. Concerned with the unsteady seas, Zeus thought he had found a solution to ease Poseidon's violent outbursts. The sea god needed a wife. The Olympian lord asked Nereus, an ancient sea deity in declension, to yield one of his beautiful daughters to marry Poseidon. He was honored to have one of his descendants reign over the seas. Once Poseidon was notified that Nereus would grant one of his daughters to marry the god, he left to meet his future wife. The Nereids, Nereus's daughter, were brought to the god of the sea so that he could choose his new wife. The Nereids were gorgeous sea nymphs, but one girl in particular caught Poseidon's attention. Her name was Amphitrite. Her black hair like the night made her stand out among the others. On seeing her, the god already knew who his new wife would be. The god sailed off confidently and with a lewd expression in his eyes to marry the beautiful sea nymph. But the innocent mermaid was repulsed by Poseidon's attempt and fled into the darkness of the ocean's depths. As a result, Poseidon searched the entire ocean for Amphitrite, to no avail. The disappointment in romance made the god even more surly. It was now Zeus who was antsy about the whole situation and forced Doris, Amphitrite's mother, to reveal her daughter's whereabouts. Without any alternative, she revealed her daughter's location. Afraid of frightening the nymph again, Poseidon dispatched his loyal dolphin to convince the Nereid to meet with him. Amphitrite relented to the claims of such a graceful creature and decided to return and give the god of the seas a shot. The mermaid would eventually become the new queen of the seas. In anticipation for her service to Poseidon, Delphin the dolphin was fashioned into a constellation. The union of Poseidon and Amphitrite gave birth to Triton, a god half man, half fish. He would serve as Poseidon's messenger and became his heir. Zeus's scheme apparently worked. The seas became more peaceful and less dangerous. However, not even all the charm of his wife was strong enough to contain the bitter temper of the Lord of the Seas.
Hermes was born of the union of Zeus and Maia. His mother was one of the Pleiades, daughters of the Titan Atlas. When this god was still a baby, his mother kept him concealed inside a cave, sleeping under the care of Hypnos. However, noticing that his guardian had fallen asleep, the small god escaped from the cave and started to explore the world. As he wandered through the region of Thessaly, Hermes encountered Apollo, who was taking care of his flock. The young god decided that he would conquer those splendid animals, and he waited for the sunset to initiate his theft. Hermes opened the gate and took 50 head of cattle with him. But he knew that he needed a good strategy, otherwise Apollo would easily find him. So, he attached tree branches to the animals' tails, so that the leaves would sweep his footsteps. In some occasions, he forced the cattle to take a different route, where the oxen would march backwards, giving the impression that the cattle were headed in the other direction. Yet halfway through his path, Hermes is spotted by a man who asked him, "What is a boy doing with so many head of cattle?" Hermes knew that he did not have a proper answer to that, and decided to bribe the man.
"I'll give you a head of cattle if you don't tell anyone you saw me."
"I'll not. You can trust me."
The god continued his journey, but remained suspicious, and so he decided to return disguised as a man. "Did you see a kid with cattle passing by this place? If you help me, I'll give you a great reward."
"Yes, of course I did. He went in that direction."
"Stay here. I will get your reward." The god walked to a mountain and tore a large chunk, throwing it on the man's head.
"There you go. The great reward that you deserve."
When he arrived in the Peloponnese, Hermes sacrificed part of the flock in honor of the gods. After his offering, the god found a turtle shell and, making use of the tendons of the sacrificed oxen, he invented a musical instrument that would be known as the lyra. Hermes returned home and lied in his cradle. Apollo realized that he had been robbed and went after his flock. Hermes' tricks conceal the villain's identity. The god was then forced to use his powers that turned everything obscure into something as clear as the sunlight. And so he reached Hermes' hideout. There the baby slept peacefully. Apollo forced Maia to wake the baby to have him reveal where his flock was.
"Can't you see that that child is sleeping quietly? How could he have done all that you're mentioning?"
Furious and embarrassed, Apollo said, I don't know how he did it. I just know he did it.
Do you want to tell me that one of the most powerful gods of the Olympus was deceived by a baby? Isn't that impossible?
At that point, Hermes started strumming his lyre, and the sound of the instrument touched Apollo's heart, who was dazzled by the object and said, "Give me that instrument as a gift, and everything will be forgotten." Hermes agreed, and from that, the brother gods established a friendly bond. Apollo gave him his caduceus and blessed his brother with gifts that would make him a deity worthy of being among the most important of Mount Olympus. Zeus welcomed him there with winged sandals, transforming him into a messenger god. The story of the theft of Apollo's flock reached the whole world, and Hermes started to be revered by all kinds of crooks, becoming known as the god of thieves as well.
In ancient Greece, there was a half-man, half-fish sea creature with green hair. His name was Glaucus. He had once been a mortal man, but was transformed into a marine deity after eating a magical herb. Once, Glaucus spotted a gorgeous nymph dipping her feet in the seawater. She was known as Scylla, and he fell in love immediately. When Glaucus tried to approach her to declare his love, the nymph ran away, frightened at the sight of such a different being. The next day, Glaucus returned to that beach. There was Scylla on the rocks, at a safe distance. He could then introduce himself and declare his intentions. Even though she was no longer afraid of Glaucus, she rejected him. Hopelessly in love, Glaucus became desperate at the pain of rejection. In that distressed state, he went to the island of the sorceress Circe, for he knew she had the power to help him conquer the nymph's heart. But Circe, who had never seen such an exotic being, was fascinated by Glaucus and tried to convince him to forget the nymph and devote himself to the sorceress. Glaucus, however, had no room in his heart for Circe's love. He rejected her and said that his love belonged to Scylla. Even though she was extremely angry at being snubbed, Circe made a magic potion for Glaucus to offer to Scylla. With this, he would be granted all the love he deserved. Glaucus gave the potion to Scylla as a gesture of friendship, and the nymph drank it all, for it tasted delicious. Scylla went through a horrifying metamorphosis. Her arms started to turn into tentacles, much to Glaucus's abhorrence. The poor nymph was morphed into a hideous, gargantuan monster with multiple heads, feet, and tentacles. No love could withstand the creature's hideous appearance, and all of Glaucus's passion turned to disgust. Scylla took refuge on the rocks of the Strait of Messina, in a cave near the fearsome Charybdis, a deep sea monster that swallowed up vast volumes of water in a huge whirlpool that sucked in everything around it. Scylla and Charybdis became one of the gravest dangers for all navigators. Legendary heroes such as Odysseus, Jason, and Aeneas encountered these terrible creatures and almost lost their lives. In ancient Greece, the myth of Scylla and Glaucus became a warning of the dangers of unrequited love, where the rejected person can take desperate or vengeful actions against innocent people. In the distant kingdom of Phrygia, the god Dionysus could not find Silenus, his faithful drinking companion. He was also the god's master and foster parent. Silenus was considered a sage who delivered his best lessons when drunk, while acquiring the power of prophecy. The wise old man was found passed out by peasants in the forest after suffering an alcoholic coma. They took him to King Midas, who recognized and welcomed him immediately with full hospitality. There were days of drinking and feasting in honor of the illustrious guest. The god Dionysus was pleased to find his old companion so well treated by his host. He greeted King Midas and, as a sign of gratitude for the good deed, decreed to fulfill any of Midas's wishes. The ambitious Midas did not reflect deeply on the matter and quickly chose his wish. "I want everything I touch to turn into gold." "Are you sure?" "Yes, of course. I will be the richest man who ever lived." Dionysus fulfilled his wish. but felt sorry for Midas that he didn't make a better choice. Midas, eager to test his new talent, picked up a small stone that lay on the ground, and it immediately turned into a gold nugget. Euphoric, Midas touched several things, and all of them immediately displayed the golden color of gold. Midas suddenly felt hungry and decided to eat an apple. As he touched the fruit, it turned into a copy of the golden palms in the gardens of the Hesperides. The shrewd Midas tried a new approach. He took a fork, which soon turned golden, and stuck it into a piece of bread. The king brought the fork to his mouth, and as he tried to bite into it, he felt his tooth crack, as the bread had also turned gold. The king realized that what he thought was a gift was now a curse. Midas felt that his end was inevitable, since he would quickly die without food, and he collapsed in tears on the dining table. The king's daughter arrived at the palace and saw her father weeping on the table. Attempting to console him, she touched her father's hand. Midas looked in horror at his daughter, who had turned into a statue of gold. In desperation, he knelt and asked the god Dionysus to remove that nefarious power. The god took pity on Midas, as he had no intention of harming Midas and his daughter. Dionysus asked the king to plunge into the waters of the river Pactolus, and, already in the water, to ask that the power of his touch be removed. Midas bathed in the waters, and the riverbed became covered with a golden sand, and the scales of the fish also began to glitter like gold. The king was finally free of the curse. Everything he touched returned to normal, including his daughter. After this trauma, Midas repudiated all wealth and left in the company of Pan to live simply and humbly in the fields and forests. In early times, Zeus led the victory of the Olympian gods against the Titans during the Titanomachy, the war between gods and Titans for control of the universe. Zeus became the supreme god, reigning over the world on his throne in Mount Olympus. When the god raised his arm, exposing his powerful bolts, the other gods bowed as a sign of respect. No god had as much authority as Zeus. Only the goddess Hera, Zeus's wife, was as respected as her husband, but not even the goddess could go against the supreme god when he was stubborn. Zeus, although he loved his wife, was not faithful to her, and he lived extramarital relationships. For this reason, Hera and Zeus fight constantly due to the latter's infidelity. Tired of being humiliated by her husband, the goddess started plotting against the Lord of Olympus. The other Olympian gods were also sick and tired of Zeus's arrogance and egotism. He ordered and ruled the world according to his will. Under Hera's leadership, they decided to come up with a coup against their sovereign. The gods entered the room where Zeus slept in a glorious crib. Poseidon and Apollo grabbed the god's arms and chained him to his bed, making use of powerful gold chains made by Hephaestus. By the time Zeus noticed what was happening, he was already immobilized. Consumed by anger, the god uttered the most terrible threats, but the other gods paid no mind to him. They were more interested in who would occupy the supreme throne. The goddess Hera, queen of Olympus and leader of the uprising, considered herself to be the obvious choice to occupy her husband's throne. But the throne had other suitors. Athena thought herself the most knowledgeable and dignified. In turn, Apollo believed that only the sun god could bring light to this new cycle, while Poseidon claimed to be the most powerful. Hestia was the only one who did not run for the position. Thetis, the daughter of Nereus, predicted that a civil war was about to take place at Olympus. The fight of brothers against brothers could throw the world into chaos, and only the steady hand of Zeus could avoid such conflict. Thetis met powerful Briareus, the greatest of the Hecatoncheires, a massive creature with 100 arms and 50 heads. Briareus's loyalty to Zeus was unbreakable, and he went to Olympus. The gods were paralyzed in front of such a creature. The Hecatoncheire broke the chains that imprisoned Zeus. The supreme god unleashed a mighty thunder sound, trembling the whole universe. The gods who participated in the coup laid down their weapons as a sign of submission. This tackled part of the gods' fury. Hera was punished for leading the rebellion against Zeus. The goddess was chained and hung in the sky. She remained in that position until she took a solemn oath, promising she would never rebel against her husband again. Zeus had a special punishment for Apollo and Poseidon. The gods had to serve the Trojan king Laomedon and help in the construction of the impenetrable Trojan walls. Pan, the god of the woods, was always a deity despised by his peers. However, after inventing the syringe flute, his musical talent blossomed, and the god was followed and respected wherever he went. Pan used to wander through the woods and meadows with his new friend, King Midas. The latter was known for his ability to turn everything he touched into gold. But this talent became a curse. After his golden touch was removed by Dionysus, Midas repudiated the vile metal and lived modestly in the forests. It was there that he met Pan, and the two became great friends. The ego of the god of the woods began to grow due to the praise of those who listened to his songs. Pan began to believe that he was the greatest musician ever, and started to boast about it. But in the audience, a nymph said that the god Apollo could very well be the greatest of all musicians.
Even Apollo's lyre is obscured before the magnificent sound of my flute. Since he is so good, why doesn't he challenge me to a musical duel?
My friend, it's not smart to challenge Apollo. He is the god of music.
Whose side are you on?
You know we are friends, and I will always support you.
Pan's challenge reached Apollo's ears, who quickly accepted it and left for the place marked for the clash.
So, are you the one who has been saying that you can defeat the god of music in a dispute? The god of music, the god of the sun, the god of prophecy. You have accumulated many roles, but today I will relieve you of one. Ah, you couldn't even beat Orpheus, my mortal son, let alone the great Apollo. The gods, nymphs, and other forest creatures gathered to listen to the greatest musical contest ever. Pan took up his flute and began the concert. His skill was remarkable. The melody thrilled all listeners. The god of the woods finished his music and was cheered. He would hardly be defeated. But the god Apollo was undeterred. After tuning his lyre, he prepared to play his music. The god's chords were perfect. The harmony was absolute. No sound could be more divine. The audience shouted, "Bravo!" The nymph's eyes dripped tears of emotion. Victory seemed evident. The men pointed to Apollo as the winner. The nymphs and the fauns, although they liked both, also chose the sun god. Midas would have to give his verdict. He looked at his friend, who was dejected at the impending defeat.
Today, Apollo moved everyone with his music. but Pan's flute was no less than perfect. I declare Pan superior."
Midas knew that Apollo had already won the contest and decided to give his friend a consolation vote. But he didn't expect the reaction of the god Apollo, who wanted to humiliate Pan with a unanimous victory. The god approached Midas and said,
"You seem to have an interest in music, but I believe those ears of yours are not useful to you. But I can fix that."
Apollo used his powers to punish Midas.
"There you go. With these new ears, everyone will recognize what a great music critic you are."
In the ancient city of Corinth reigned a rather cunning man. His name was Sisyphus. He was probably the smartest man of his time. The smartest, but not the wisest. Sisyphus was a direct descendant of Prometheus. This deity had the boldness to stick his nose into the matters of Zeus and paid a high price for the intromission. And, much like his ancestor, Sisyphus decided to interfere in the gods' affairs. He witnessed the kidnapping of the young and beautiful Aegina by the eagle-shaped Zeus, and he realized he could take advantage of it. Although he was king of a glorious city, this metropolis struggled with a shortage of drinking water. Young Aegina was the daughter of Aesopus, a river god, who was deeply saddened by the disappearance of his daughter. Sisyphus went to Aesopus and declared, "I know where your daughter is, but this information comes at a price. In return, I want you to create a spring of water to supply my kingdom." Aesopus accepted Sisyphus's offer and created a spring of the purest mineral water. Sisyphus revealed to him what he knew, and Aesopus went after his daughter. King Sisyphus was pleased. This new spring would be a source of abundance and even more prestige to his city. Zeus, the supreme lord of Olympus, was enraged by Sisyphus's revelation and ordered Thanatos, also known as Death, to find him and take his life. Some time passed before Sisyphus was surprised by seeing Thanatos in his palace, but an idea quickly sprung up in his cunning and mischievous mind. He went to Death and said, "So, it seems my time has come. I did not expect to die so young. However, I am much surprised by your splendor. Indeed, you are such a magnificent deity. You shall know that of the many gods I have known, few carry such a remarkable and elegant figure. And before I leave, I would like to present you with some ornaments that will make your presence even more dazzling. After all, these jewels will no longer be of use to me." Thanatos felt flattered with such a torrential stream of compliments and decided to accept the gifts. Sisyphus put a pair of silver bracelets and a necklace on Thanatos. However, those were shackles and a collar. The Corinthian king did what appeared impossible until that point. He managed to cheat Death, and Thanatos became his prisoner. Time passed, and no one died anymore. The kingdom of Hades was no longer receiving any new subjects. On the banks of the river Acheron, Charon had no more passengers to cross the waters. The wars set by the god Ares were no longer a source of pleasure for him, as nobody died. The enraged Ares traveled to Corinth. He knocked down the palace door and broke the chains that imprisoned Thanatos. Free, the god of the dead was absolutely sure of his first target, and started to search for King Sisyphus to complete the mission Zeus had handed him. But Sisyphus was expecting that. He told his wife that, if he died prematurely, she would not render the royal funeral services. Sisyphus delivered himself peacefully to Thanatos, who took his life. Charon was already waiting to lead him to the kingdom of Hades, the lord of the underworld. The banks of the river of the dead were filled with souls already on Thanatos' list, who only now had been sought. Upon arriving in the kingdom of Hades, he was face to face with the god of the underworld, who appeared quite unhappy. After being severely admonished by the great god, Sisyphus delivered a speech he had already devised, even before his death. "Noble lord of the underworld, I'm aware of my wrongdoings against you and the harm I've caused, but that was not my intention. If I had known that I would harm the great god of the world of the dead, I never would have done so. Aware that I am in debt to you, I have a plea to make. My obnoxious wife refused to perform the proper funeral rites for a king who was so dear to his people. That abominable woman tossed me out, as if I were nothing but a dog carcass. I therefore beg you to let me return to the world of the living for only one day, so that I may take revenge on my wife and set up a proper funeral, which would honor the kingdom of the dead. You have my permission to visit in the world of the living for only one day. However, by nightfall you shall return to my domains." Sisyphus gave his word that he would return promptly. Sisyphus returned to Corinth. There he met his wife and fled with her. Once again, he had cheated death. Now concealed, Sisyphus lived a long life and reached an old age, until he encountered his inevitable end. And encountering Thanatos once more, his cleverness would no longer help him. Upon returning to the underworld, Hades sent him to Tartarus, where he received an appalling torment. Sisyphus was forced to roll a heavy boulder from a plain to a mountaintop, but every time he got close to the summit, the boulder became horrendously heavy and rolled back to the starting point. Then Sisyphus was condemned to restart his work for all eternity. In the distant kingdom of Phrygia reigned Tantalus, son of Zeus, with Princess Pluto. Due to his noble lineage, he had privileges at Olympus, sharing the table with the gods at the banquets. In his privileged position, he could hear the conversations and plots of the gods. Although he was entitled to all the hospitality of the gods when visiting Olympus, he did not respect his hosts. After leaving Olympus, Tantalus spread the secrets of the gods, which he listened to during the banquets. In another episode, he stole some nectar and ambrosia from the gods' table, food that conferred immortality and therefore was restricted to the gods. Due to their omniscience, the gods knew what Tantalus was doing. However, because they enjoyed his company, they ignored his actions and did not punish him. Tantalus wanted to repay the hospitality of the gods with a banquet in his palace. Zeus, Hermes, and Demeter accepted the invitation. The king accompanied the preparations for the banquet. He wanted the event to be perfect so that the gods would give him even more blessings. He called his son Pelops and said, "My son, today you will have the honor to share the table with the gods of Olympus."
Thank you, my dear father. Finally, I will have, like you, the privilege of being at the table in the presence of my glorious grandfather.
The young Pelops walked radiantly towards his room to prepare himself for the banquet. Tantalus called the cook and said,
"Today you shall prepare the most splendrous meal."
The king whispered something in the cook's ear, who could not hide his concern. The gods arrived at the palace, where they were received with all reverence. The banquet started to be served, and the guests talked about the most diverse subjects. Then, Zeus posed the question,
"Where is my grandson? You said he would be among us." "Don't worry, father of mine. Soon he will be at the table with you."
The moment of the main course arrived. The cook brought a beautiful stew with an unmatchable aroma. The goddess Demeter, who was in a deep sorrow due to the departure of her daughter Persephone to the kingdom of Hades, devoured the stew to slightly improve her mood. Tantalus served the stew to Zeus and Hermes. The two gods exchanged suspicious looks.
"Don't you like my offering to the gods?" You degenerate creature! How dare you serve human flesh to the gods? It's not a mere human sacrifice, my father. It's the greatest sacrifice. I'm offering you the flesh of my firstborn son.
Demeter, who had already eaten a large piece of flesh, felt sick.
We have been complacent with your crimes in the past, but this deserves to be punished in an exemplary way.
Tantalus was sent to Tartarus, where he would suffer a terrible punishment. He was placed in a lake surrounded by fruit trees. The water covered him up to his chin, and the fruits were within reach of his hands. However, Tantalus constantly felt a terrible hunger and thirst. When he drew down to drink water, the lake level also dropped, preventing him from quenching his thirst. When the hunger appeared, he tried to reach the fruits over his head, but the wind pushed the branches and the fruit away. The gods decided to resurrect the innocent Pelops. They made him even more beautiful than before. However, one of his shoulders was missing, the one devoured by the goddess Demeter. Zeus asked Hephaestus to create an ivory shoulder for his grandson. Back to life, Pelops became king of the Peloponnese. Meanwhile, his father suffered eternal punishment in Tartarus, with the objects of his desire so close and at the same time so far away.
King Ixion of Thessaly was a nefarious man who ruled his kingdom with an iron fist. In Thessaly, the best horses in Greece were bred, and only the best resided in the king's stud farm. The king fell in love with the beautiful Dia, daughter of Ionius, a nobleman of the region. Ixion promised Ionius that he would give him some of his famous horses in exchange for the hand of the beautiful young woman. However, after marrying Dia, Ixion didn't fulfill his part of the agreement, which outraged the now father-in-law. He decided to take justice into his own hands and stole Ixion's horses. Ixion was furious and came up with a plan to get revenge on his father-in-law. Ionius was invited to a meeting with Ixion in his palace on the pretext of making peace. Ixion received his father-in-law cordially, but the king had a plan against his wife's father. King invited Ionius to visit a new division of his palace. This one had a moat, and when the visitor stretched his neck to see what was inside it, he was pushed by his son-in-law. Ionius fell into the ditch that was full of embers. The guest was consumed by the flames and cried out in pain to Ixion's satisfaction. And, before he was devoured by the flames, Ionius saw his daughter's charred body beside him. But Ixion's sins would not be forgiven. The king was deposed and became a vagabond, being stoned and spat at every place. After years of suffering, Ixion seemed to repent and asked the gods for forgiveness. Zeus took pity on the man who had once been a great king and invited him to visit Olympus. Ixion participated in celestial banquets and fraternized with Olympian deities, but his lack of character emerged again. Ixion fell in love with the goddess Hera, wife of Zeus, his host. He even confessed to the goddess his desire to be carnally united with her. Hera rejected him and told her husband everything. Zeus did not believe that his guest would be capable of such an act. To test Ixion, Zeus molded a cloud with the same outline as the goddess Hera. The goddess-shaped cloud flirted with Ixion. He did not hesitate and united with the false goddess. From this sin against hospitality, bizarre creatures were born, a mixture of man and horse that would become known as centaurs. Zeus expelled Ixion from Olympus. He wasn't more ruthless as he felt some empathy with Ixion. After all, as we know, the great god also struggled to contain his lust. But Zeus would regret his clemency. Ixion, after returning to the world of men, boasted that he had been with the Queen of Heaven, and that enraged Zeus. The supreme god fulminated Ixion with one of his rays, and his spirit was thrown into the depths of Tartarus. Ixion was put on a burning wheel, bound by serpents. He would spend eternity burning in the spinning wheel. In an ancient Greek city located in the region of Lydia, there was a child who loved to play with the wool threads she found in her father's dyeing shop. Her name was Arachne. Her skills in the arts of weaving and embroidery developed remarkably as she grew. Arachne started to be known as a great artist. Nobles from all over the region ordered her treasured works. Arachne's reputation kept growing. Many visited Arachne's workshop just to see her work. Even the nymphs left their hiding places to contemplate the works of art of the young weaver.
This young woman has such a stunning ability. This can only be a gift from Athena, the weaver's patroness. A gift from Athena? How can you attribute all my work's merit to a goddess who never showed up around here?
But you must be grateful to Athena. She is the patroness of the weavers.
What you attribute as divine talent was not given to me by the gods. I acquired it after several years of study, work, and dedication.
The goddess Athena was informed that a young woman claimed to be the greatest weaver ever, surpassing Athena herself.
These impetuous youngsters always considered themselves to be invincible, never assessing the consequences of their actions. But, luckily for her, today I'm in a good mood.
Athena took the form of an old lady and visited Arachne's shop. Athena acknowledged that the girl's work was incredible indeed. She wanted to guide her in the right direction before the gods.
Little girl! Indeed, you were born with such a remarkable talent, but due to your youth, I believe it is not wise to want to compare yourself to the gods. Those who have granted you everything and can take it all away as well.
I owe Athena nothing. I'm almost sure that my works are more beautiful than hers. If she were that good, she would have the courage to accept my challenge.
You senseless girl! How dare you challenge the gods?
Athena revealed her identity, and the nymphs bowed to the goddess. But the daring weaver faced her standing with an inflexible stare.
Do you really think you can compare yourself to Zeus's daughter and the patroness of weavers?
Athena and Arachne began an unlikely clash, where a youngster who was little more than a little girl challenged one of the most renowned deities. The girl and the goddess spared no efforts to do the best they could. Athena wove a scene depicting her glorious victory over Poseidon in the race for Athens. Indeed, it was truly an impressive piece. When Athena saw Arachne's work, she was amazed. It was magnificent.
While you gods promote yourselves by showing off your achievements, I prefer to show off the other side of the great deities.
Arachne produced a work in which Zeus disguised himself as a bull to deceive the poor Princess Europa. Athena was enraged and tore Arachne's work, but the biggest reason for her anger was not because of the offense against the gods, but because Arachne's work was just perfect and unblemished.
You mortals are all the same. Whenever you are given exceptional talents, you are consumed by pride, arrogance, and vanity, thinking you are on the same level as the gods.
The goddess punished Arachne, and the young woman was turned into a hideous, eight-legged creature. But the goddess didn't expect that, by being eight-legged, she would start weaving even better. And when the goddess saw the last of the weaver's work, she said,
Damn her! She really is good.
Arcadia, Greece, 5000 BC. Lycaon was one of the first kings of Arcadia, a region that in the distant past had been one of the most splendid places that ever existed. During the golden age of men, the abundant wealth that sprang from these lands brought happiness and peace.
But the selfishness and greed of men put an end to this utopian kingdom. King Lycaon, who one day was a crude and heartless man, seemed determined to recover the prosperity of the golden years of Arcadia, and he became adored by his people. Lycaon knew that restoring Arcadia's glory was impossible without the god's blessing, so he built a great temple in honor of Zeus. The supreme god, grateful for the tribute, began to favor the king of Arcadia. Satisfied with the fruits of his labors, Lycaon dedicated himself to obsessively pleasing the gods, and he became a religious fanatic. To obtain more blessings, the king began to make absurd sacrifices, even reaching the sacrifice of humans. However, this practice had been long condemned by the gods. The naive foreigners who arrived in the region were captured to be sacrificed. This was an enormous offense to the duty of hospitality, one of Zeus's demands. When he learned what was happening in Arcadia, Zeus, in disguise, decided to check if it was true. On arrival, Zeus was taken to the palace to be presented to the king and then sacrificed. However, one of the king's sons realized that the guest was extremely calm and warned the king.
"Father, there is something odd. The calm of this man upsets me. Is Zeus testing our hospitality, as he did with Philemon and Bacchus?"
"Soon we will find out." The king ordered a banquet in honor of the guest, but the main course would be something sinisterly unique. The banquet began to be organized with various delicacies. The main course is brought, and Zeus was horrified. A platter with human flesh was placed on the table. Lycaon and his son ate the hideous meal.
"You won't refuse our hospitality, right?"
"Damned fanatics, you have misrepresented the cult of the gods in a heinous way, and you will pay the price of this sacrilege."
Lycaon's teeth began to turn into fangs, and his skin covered with hair. Zeus transformed Lycaon and his descendants into half-man and half-wolf creatures. The beasts began to roam the fields, feeding on the cattle and terrorizing the people who lived in the region. And during the full moon nights, it was possible to hear the laments of the king, transformed into the creature we know today as a werewolf. On Mount Olympus, a young deity paraded herself. She was the goddess of spring, and her youthful beauty enchanted the male deities. Her name was Cora, but she would become better known as Persephone. Demeter, her mother, was overprotective and shielded the young girl from the Olympic gods. She wanted her daughter to maintain her purity and virginity, as did the goddesses Athena, Artemis, and Hestia. So the goddess of agriculture kept Aphrodite and her son Eros away from her daughter. The divinities of love did not want to have another divinity in Olympus immune to their influence, and planned a way to attack the young goddess. Far from Olympus, in the depths of the earth, there was another god who lived free from the influence of the gods of love. His name was Hades, the lord of the underworld. The endless tasks of managing his kingdom allowed Hades to think of nothing else but his work. But a great tremor disturbed the kingdom of Hades, which rose to the surface to see what was happening. The Etna volcano was erupting, a sign that Typhon, the monster imprisoned by Zeus, was especially unhappy. That's when the god heard a sweet voice coming from a nearby forest. In the woods, Persephone sang without realizing that anyone was watching her. Aphrodite and Eros noticed Hades' interest in Persephone and wanted to take the opportunity. The god of passion and love fulminated the heart of the god with one of his golden arrows, which instilled desire and passion in the hearts of men and gods. Consumed by passion, Hades approached the spring goddess, who did not feel his approach. Hades tried to flirt with the young woman, but she resisted. Impetuously, Hades grabbed his beloved, and the earth opened so that he could return to his domain. With the goddess in his arms, the god of the dead descended through a tunnel into his kingdom. Persephone was very agitated and was locked in a room of Hades' palace until she became calmer. Hades declared his love for Persephone, who, although she felt attracted by the god, was still trying to push him away. Demeter started to get distressed because she didn't know where her daughter was, so she wandered the world in search of Persephone. After much searching, she found one of the nymphs who used to accompany her daughter. She told her how Hades kidnapped the girl, taking her to the underworld when the earth opened. Demeter was furious and would not forgive Gaia, the goddess of the earth, who had been an accomplice to her daughter's abduction when she opened up. As goddess of agriculture, Demeter was responsible for soil fertility. To punish Gaia, she decided to make the land infertile. The goddess cried because she missed her daughter, and, due to the great sadness she felt, she started to neglect her tasks. Zeus started to worry about the situation of the planet, because if Demeter didn't perform her tasks again, chaos would take over the world. The great god tried to convince Demeter to return to her tasks, but she said that the world would remain infertile until she had her daughter back. Zeus assured that Persephone would be freed from the underworld unless she had fed on some fruit from the underworld. At Zeus's request, Hermes guided Demeter to the underworld. After all, he was the conductor of souls, knowing the intricate ways that lead to the kingdom of Hades. The goddess met her daughter at the very moment she was eating pomegranate seeds offered by the lord of the underworld. After eating the fruit, Persephone metamorphosed and became the queen of the underworld. Demeter rebuked her daughter for agreeing to eat the food offered by such an evil being. Persephone said that her husband was not so bad. He treated her with respect and genuinely loved her. On top of everything else, there she would be a true queen. Demeter's heart felt an intense pain, and she started crying. Moved by his mother-in-law's sadness, Hades proposed a deal. Persephone would spend part of the year in the underworld, and the other part with his mother on the surface. Once the deal was sealed, Persephone returned to the surface with her mother. In the ground, which was infertile, many flowers sprouted. The harvests were chock-full again. But the meeting period between Persephone and Demeter ran out, and the young goddess returned to the underworld to see her husband again. Demeter was desolate to see her daughter leave, and, depressed, she neglected her tasks again. But when mother and daughter met again, the world flourished once more, and so the seasons were born. Adonis was a beautiful young hunter. While wandering the woods in search of his prey, the young man was worshipped by the flower nymphs. His beauty was so striking that he looked like a god. One day, Adonis's beauty even drew Aphrodite's attention. The goddess of beauty and love, who was playing in the forest with her son Eros, sharpening his arrows. The goddess was delighted with the young man and began to praise him to her son. Eros grew angry due to jealousy and turned his back on his mother while continuing to sharpen his golden arrows. Aphrodite said that Eros should not be jealous as to her. He would always be the most beautiful. She hugged him to comfort him, but accidentally ended up injuring herself on the arrow that Eros was holding. And so Aphrodite fell in love with Adonis. The goddess was spying the beautiful young man, and she could not resist his charms and succumbed to passion. Aphrodite asked the young man who he was, since his beauty was so wonderful that he resembled a god. Adonis knew that this lovely woman could only be Aphrodite, the goddess of love. He said that he was not a god, but a mere mortal. Aphrodite was intrigued because she didn't know that a man could be almost as perfect as a god. Aphrodite drew closer with such a seductive look that no god, much less a mortal, could resist. The couple kissed and began to see each other regularly. These were days of passionate love. On a spring day, Persephone, the queen of the underworld, was wandering through the woods and stumbled upon the loving couple. She was delighted with what she saw. But she did not know that Eros, the god of love, was ready to pull another one of his pranks. He shot her with one of his arrows. The queen was now also in love with the boy, and decided that Aphrodite should enjoy it while she could, because one day the beautiful boy would be hers. Aphrodite was overzealous of Adonis, fearing that the young and daring hunter would injure himself on his hunts. But he kept telling her not to worry, because he was very experienced and promised not to take any chances. However, apart from Aphrodite and Persephone, there was one more god who was keeping an eye on the boy. His name was Ares, the god of war, who was Aphrodite's lover and therefore bore a great hatred for his rival. Ares knew that the young man's love for hunting rivaled his love for Aphrodite, and so plotted his revenge. Adonis roamed the woods in search of yet another prey when he stumbled upon a mighty boar. Ares stirred up the young man's bloodlust. He ended up forgetting the promise he made to the goddess of not risking himself needlessly. Adonis chose to fight the beast and managed to wound it. But Ares inflated the beast's heart with unbridled fury. The boar decided not to flee to preserve its life, but to furiously charge Adonis. He drove its powerful tusks into his abdomen. Adonis was mortally wounded. Aphrodite came running to his aid, but there was nothing more she could do. He died in her arms. She buried him, and upon his tomb grew beautiful red flowers that were named Adonis. As one goddess wept, another in the underworld was beaming and waiting for the arrival of the most beautiful man who ever lived. The powerless goddess of love watched the arrival of Hermes, who was there to lead Adonis's soul to Hades' realm. In the netherworld, Queen Persephone eagerly awaited the arrival of the most beautiful man in the world, for whom she cherished a great passion sparked by Eros's arrow. Adonis was welcomed in the underworld by specters, who treated him with great honors. The boy was surprised at such a reception. He had no idea of the love that the queen of the underworld had for him. Persephone's loyal specters lodged the boy in a special room in the royal palace. While Hades, the underworld lord, was asleep, his queen broke into her guest's chamber. The beautiful goddess cornered the young boy, but he tried to dodge her. He dreaded Hades' revenge, but the goddess told him not to worry. If he didn't tell the god, she wouldn't tell him either. With no way out, he gave in to the goddess's lust. The sneaky encounters continued day after day. Aphrodite longed for her lover and promptly decided to go down to the Hades realm and rescue her sweetheart. She found Adonis there serving the underworld gods, and said she was there to bring her beloved Adonis back to the surface. Hades, however, was aggrieved to see the goddess of love invading his kingdom and making demands. Hades told her that he did not care for Aphrodite's will. He appreciated the services rendered by Adonis, and he would remain in the underworld forever. But Aphrodite threatened to extinguish all love from the face of the earth. Only bitterness and grudge would remain between the couples. Hades ousted Aphrodite from his kingdom. She left in tears, but her threats were not empty. Throughout the world, love between couples began to dwindle. The relationship between Zeus and the goddess Hera, usually strained, was becoming unbearable. Zeus decided that something had to be done. He called for a meeting with Hades, Persephone, and Aphrodite, saying that the whole situation couldn't go on. He suggested Hades take possession of Adonis, just like the agreement he had made with the goddess Demeter. For a third of the year, he would stay in the underworld. The next third he would spend on the surface with Aphrodite, and the young man would have a third to enjoy in any way he wished. Hades took issue with Zeus's intrusion into matters of his kingdom, but knowing that Adonis was Persephone's favorite servant, he said he would not accept such an offer. To Hades' surprise, however, Persephone replied that, if it was for the good of all, she would allow Adonis to resurface and return to her husband's kingdom only when winter was approaching. Baffled, Hades did not understand why Persephone would release Adonis without putting up a fight. Spring arrived and Adonis departed to meet his lover Aphrodite. But summer meant that the goddess had to leave him. Hades had not anticipated summer is also the time that Persephone comes out of the underworld to find her mother, the goddess Demeter. And during the summer, Adonis and Persephone loved each other without bothering about being caught by the underworld king. But the quarrel between Persephone and Aphrodite remained. They always sought to maximize the length of their relationship with Adonis. This is why in some years the winter seems longer or the heat of summer persists. The love story of Hades and Persephone is one of Greek mythology's most famous. You have certainly heard the story that the god kidnapped her, which gave rise to the seasons. But before he met Persephone, Hades had a lover named Minthe, a nymph who lived by the river Cocytus. However, when Hades fell madly in love with Persephone, Minthe was cast aside. Some say that when Persephone headed to the surface to spend the spring and summer with her mother, the nymph Minthe would not leave the ruler of the underworld alone. But when Persephone returned, Hades would run straight into her arms, leaving the greenish nymph abandoned. Minthe went on to brag that she was the most beautiful entity in the underworld, as even Hades could not resist her charms. These claims made Persephone furious. The queen of the underworld would not let such an insult to her honor go unpunished. Persephone turned the nymph into a plant known as mint. Mint was a plant used in funerals in ancient Greece. One of the reasons was that the aroma masked the odor of the deceased. Therefore, the plant personified by the nymph Minthe became forever bound to her lover's domains. Have you ever heard the story of Zeus's successor? Like so many of the bastard sons of the great Olympian god, he was ruthlessly persecuted by Hera and suffered a tragic fate. Today, you will learn the story of Zagreus and his remarkable tale filled with twists and turns. Known for his numerous love affairs, Zeus turned his lust on the goddess Persephone, daughter of his sister Demeter, the goddess of the harvest and fertility. Having been kidnapped by the underworld ruler Hades, Persephone became his queen. But that would not deter Zeus. To outsmart Hades, he changed into a serpent and mated with Persephone. Zagreus was conceived from this sneaky divine bond. He was born with a great destiny, bound for mighty deeds from the moment he took his first breath. Having spotted Zagreus as a worthy heir, Zeus intended to bring him to Olympus and make him his successor. After his birth, Zagreus was entrusted to the care of the Curetes and the nymphs, divine figureheads who had a key role in protecting and educating the young gods. The Curetes were mythological warriors who danced and pounded their weapons to produce loud noises, protecting the child from Hera's jealous eyes, which harbored a deep resentment toward Zeus's illegitimate children. This sound protection from the Curetes prevented the baby's cries from reaching Hera on Olympus, making it essential to keep Zagreus safe from any threats. For their part, the nymphs played a crucial role in Zagreus's upbringing. They were known for their abilities in different arts and natural knowledge. Zagreus was raised in an educational environment where he learned about nature, music, and dance, as well as being instructed in life and death mysteries. The goddess Athena was a particularly important figure in his upbringing. She was particularly interested in Zagreus and often visited the place where he was being raised. Athena, being the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, imparted to Zagreus a profound understanding of strategy, leadership, and the divine mysteries. Although surrounded by love and protection, Zagreus was not completely immune to the machinations of Olympus. His childhood was a time of intense training and protection. He grew up not just as a young god, but as an entity meant for great deeds and challenges. Once Zagreus had reached maturity, Zeus, acknowledging his son's strength and potential, intended to prepare him to take the throne and rule over gods and mortals. This revealed Zeus's trust in his abilities, but it also marked a meaningful change in the Olympian balance of power. But Zeus's decision triggered the envy and fury of Hera, his wife and queen of the gods, known for her jealousy and vindictiveness against Zeus's lovers and illegitimate children. The goddess could not accept the idea that a son of Zeus with another woman, particularly Persephone, could be the next ruler. Hera considered this a threat to her own power and that of her legitimate children. She was also deeply concerned about the potential alliances that Zagreus could form, considering that he had been born from the relationship between Zeus and Persephone, connecting heaven and the underworld. Intent on having his plan fulfilled, Zeus entrusted Zagreus with the thunderbolt, the symbol of his ultimate power, stating his clear desire to make him the next ruler. This ceremonial act designated Zagreus as the chosen one, an honor that came with lofty expectations and responsibilities. Deciding to prevent Zagreus from taking the throne, Hera plotted to destroy the threat he posed. The goddess urged the Titans, ancient deities known for their strength and malice, to attack Zagreus. By offering them power and benefits, Hera managed to persuade them to implement her evil plan. While Zeus dreamt of a bright future for his son, Hera engineered his annihilation. Disguised in white plaster, so as not to be recognized, the Titans used glowing objects to lure Zagreus. The curious and innocent young god approached them, unaware of the impending danger. When they finally succeeded in drawing him away from his guardians, the Titans savagely attacked him. They viciously dismembered Zagreus, slicing his body to pieces while he was still alive. This dismembering was more than mere physical violence. It had a deep symbolic meaning. In Greek mythology, dismemberment stood for the destruction and fragmentation of divine unity, a profanity-laced act against the order established by the Olympian gods. Following the dismemberment, the Titans devoured Zagreus's fragments, assimilating his divine power into themselves. With this ritualistic cannibalism, the Titans attempted to encroach on Zeus's power by destroying his chosen successor. Yet this defilement did not go undetected. The goddess Athena saved Zagreus's heart before the Titans could devour it. She took it to Zeus, who, profoundly shocked and angered by the Titans' betrayal, exacted his almighty revenge. He destroyed them with his thunderbolts, reducing them to cinders. Zagreus's heart was used by Zeus to usher in the young god's rebirth. With this, Zagreus would rise again as Dionysus, bearing with him the promise of renewal and the continuity of divine life. Zagreus was therefore reborn under a new identity. Dionysus inherited Zagreus's divine nature and his magnificent destiny, but now he also bore traits of life and death, joy and madness, wine and feasts. As Dionysus, he became the god of wine, fertility, ecstasy, and theater, carrying with him the promise of renewal and transformation. Zagreus Dionysus came to be worshipped all over ancient Greece, with a particularly strong cult among the Orphic, a religious group that revered death and rebirth as part of an eternal cycle. The Zagreus Dionysus myth was central to the Orphic religion, which stressed spiritual purification and the soul's immortality. Dionysus's followers held celebrations in his honor, such as the Dionysian festivals, with processions, dances, music, and theater. These celebrations expressed Dionysus's dual nature, joy and ecstasy, but also madness and chaos. Orphic customs included initiation rituals that symbolized death and rebirth, echoing Zagreus Dionysus's own experience. Zagreus Dionysus's legacy also spread to Greek philosophy and literature. This myth influenced philosophers such as Plato and poets like Euripides, who further explored the topics of transformation, rebirth, and the redeeming power of suffering. This narrative may have given you unexpectedly different information from what you usually find in other myths.
This is because the Orphic myths are significantly different from the Greek ones told by Hesiod and other classical sources. Whereas Hesiod and like-minded poets focus on narratives that place emphasis on the hierarchical nature of the gods and divine genealogies, Orphic myths have a more mystical and esoteric approach, focusing on spiritual purification and the immortality of the soul. Orphic traditions feature death and rebirth themes, typified by the figure of Zagreus Dionysus, and encourage initiation rituals and a cyclical view of life, death, and rebirth. By contrast, Hesiod's works, such as the Theogony, depict a more linear and hierarchical cosmos, where order is established through conflicts between generations of gods. While Hesiod's mythology is focused on the origins and order of the physical universe, the Orphic myths explore the spiritual and transcendental aspects of existence. For this reason, Zagreus Dionysus has a significant role within Orphism, and his myth is still so relevant today. The Isthmian Games were celebrated in the city of Corinth. They were a kind of Olympic Games in honor of Poseidon. The contestants would compete in different events, but the chariot race was the most prestigious. The best drivers took part in the sport. Among them was Phaethon, son of the Titan Helios, with the nymph Clymene. In case of victory in the chariot competition, the sun god promised his son to grant him anything he desired. Motivated by his father's promise, Phaethon won the hotly contested chariot race. After his victory, he boasted and said that he was such a good chariot driver that he could even drive his father's sun chariot. Helios was the god responsible for driving the sun chariot, guiding it from dawn to dusk. One of Phaethon's colleagues laughed in his face and said that only Helios could drive the sun chariot. Even his son could not achieve such a feat. Phaethon was furious at the remarks and decided to head to the far east, where the palace of the god Apollo was located. Upon arriving at his father's abode, he went to Helios's throne and told him that he already knew what he wanted as a prize for having won the race. More than anything else, he wanted to drive the sun chariot. Helios was startled by such a request, but there was nothing he could do, for the promise had been made. The goddess Aurora announced the arrival of a new day, and Phaethon was in his father's chariot, with the horses prancing and neighing. Helios advised his son to hold tightly to the reins without ever flinching, as the horses were wild and obeyed only those with a firm hand. Aurora ran ahead of the animals with her torch, and Helios's horses shot after her. Phaethon had trouble restraining them at the start. The task was more difficult than he imagined. During the great climb, Phaethon made a huge effort and used all his skill as a chariot driver to guide the horses properly. By midday, Phaethon had withstood the demanding test of the climb. He was now at the most relaxed part of the journey. The son of Helios felt like a true god contemplating the world from above, and because he was ecstatic, he eased off the reins. Feeling loose, the horses plunged toward the ground. Phaethon couldn't control them, and they were about to crash catastrophically into the earth. When the collision was near, the young man prevented the son from colliding with the earth. But still, he was flying dangerously low. Everything below was scorched by the sun. Lakes and rivers evaporated, and the sea boiled over where he passed. Noticing that the sea was boiling, Poseidon went to Olympus to demand that Zeus act. Fearing even greater damage, the supreme god decided to strike Phaethon with one of his thunderbolts. The young man didn't even realize what had hit him, and fell from the sun chariot. Phaethon tumbled out of the sky like a shooting star. His dead body fell into the river Eridanus. The frightened horses returned to Helios's palace. Phaethon's remains were collected by the naiad nymphs and buried. Over his tomb, a monument was erected to the audacity of the young man who dared to drive the sun chariot. The journey of Apollo's son left scars on the earth.
The region scorched by the sun became infertile and waterless. Today, this region is known as the Sahara Desert. The goddess Hera was looking for her husband Zeus, but she could not find him anywhere on Olympus. She was sure that he was hiding with another one of his mistresses. At the top of Olympus, the goddess saw a black cloud covering the river Inachos, and she strongly believed that her husband was hiding there. Zeus had come down to earth to meet again with his mistress, the princess Io. The young woman noticed that the goddess Hera was approaching and warned Zeus. He, in an impromptu move, decided to turn the girl into a beautiful cow. Pretending not to understand her husband's trick, the goddess asked what he was doing next to the cow, hinting that Zeus's appetites were getting increasingly bizarre. He awkwardly said that he was just admiring the magnificent animal. Hera agreed that that was a very beautiful cow, and so she would want it for herself. Zeus ran out of options and let Hera take the poor cow to Olympus. Upon arriving at Olympus, the goddess called her lackey Argus, a creature with 100 eyes. She told him to take the animal to a distant place and to watch over it constantly. The monster took the beautiful cow to Egypt, hidden from everyone. He released the animal there, keeping it under constant surveillance. Even when resting, Argus kept some of his eyes open, watching the cow-shaped nymph. After learning of Io's disappearance, Zeus asked Hermes to find and kill the creature that had taken her. Hermes scoured all the pastures, fields, and even swamps, searching for Zeus's missing little cow. Finally, the light god found Argus watching the nymph as she grazed. The god decided to disguise himself as a sheepherder and sneak up on the two. Hermes was playing the flute, and the melody pleased the creature. Argus asked the shepherd to come closer, for he had loved the music. The god played the instrument, and noticed that the monster was increasingly relaxed. His eyes began to close, but many were still open. Hera's lackey asked what the story of the instrument was. The clever Hermes decided to tell the story of how the god Pan invented the syrinx flute and narrated it as if it were a bedtime story. When the creature closed his last eye, Hermes jabbed him with his caduceus, which had the power to put anyone struck into a deep sleep. The god took his sword and decapitated the monster. The nymph was free, but still had the form of a cow. Hera, upon learning of the death of her faithful servant, decided to honor him. She placed each of his eyes on the feathers of her royal peacock, and she decided that the nymph would not get away with it. So she ordered the Furies, the entities of revenge, to torment her constantly. From that day on, the poor cow was pursued by a cloud of flies, which would not leave her alone. Tired of the harassment of the flies, the cow collapsed, and with her mooing, she begged the gods to put an end to her suffering. Standing before Hera, Zeus said that if the goddess withdrew her punishment of Io, he would never look for the princess again. Hera lifted the punishment imposed on the young princess, and Zeus reinstated her old form. The only remaining trace that resembled the little cow was her white skin tone. The Egyptian people, seeing the transformation, began to worship the young girl as a divine figure. The princess got pregnant by Zeus and gave birth to Epiphus. Both reigned in Egypt for many years. Io came to be revered as the goddess Isis, and her son Epiphus as the god Apis, founder of the great city of Memphis. In the kingdom of Phoenicia, King Agenor ordered his son Cadmus to find the whereabouts of his daughter Europa, who had been kidnapped by Zeus. The latter, shaped as a bull, had kidnapped her. The king stated that Cadmus could only return home if he brought his sister with him. Cadmus and his men went around the world, looking for clues to his sister's whereabouts, but found nothing. He went to Greece and sought help from the Oracle of Delphi. The priestess said that his fate was not to return to his father's kingdom with his sister, but to found one of the most famous cities in Greek mythology. Following the priestess's directions, Cadmus went after a cow, and where the animal would lie down, he would found a new city. The cow laid down, and Cadmus said that there the glorious city of Thebes would be established. Cadmus ordered the men to go to a spring near a cave to fetch water for the new settlement, but there was a terrible beast inside the cave that attacked and killed Cadmus's envoys. After long waiting for his men to return, Cadmus put on his lion-skin cloak and went in search of them. Cadmus was horrified by the gruesome scene he saw. A terrifying dragon had annihilated and torn his men apart. Although he had never encountered such a creature, Cadmus was not afraid and faced the beast to avenge his comrades. Cadmus was almost devoured by the beast when the dragon drove its fangs into the hero's lion cloak. He reacted and drove a spear into the beast's belly, which howled in pain. Cadmus dodged a deadly poisonous blast from the beast. As the creature caught its breath to release another venomous spurt, Cadmus threw another spear at the beast. Cadmus's spear entered the monster's mouth and pinned the creature's head to the trunk of a tree. The dragon died, and Cadmus avenged his compatriots. Despite the victory, Cadmus lost all his men to the monster. He was desolate. Athena came up behind him and told him to pull out the dragon's teeth and plant them in the ground. Armed men sprang up in the places where the dragon's teeth had been planted. To Cadmus's surprise, these warriors began to fight fiercely among themselves, and a great brotherly bloodbath ensued. Only the 5 best warriors remained, who knelt before Cadmus, their new king, helping him to build the new city. The gods graced Cadmus. He was offered the hand of the goddess Harmonia, daughter of Ares and Aphrodite. Cadmus and Harmonia gave birth to the legendary Theban royal house, and their descendants made their mark on Greek mythology. Aphrodite was known for having many lovers. One of them was Hermes, a messenger god. From this union would be born a child named Hermaphroditus, after both parents. The child was raised by the nymphs at the foot of Mount Ida. From an early age, the child displayed the divine beauty inherited from his parents. When he was no longer a child, he left Mount Ida to discover the world. Wherever he passed, he drew attention given his physical beauty. After one of his hunts, he stooped down to cool off in the waters of a pond. And suddenly, Salmacis, the naiad nymph, appeared, delighted by the young man's beauty and yearning to join him. Hermaphroditus rejected the nymph, but Salmacis would not give up easily. The young man went into the waters of the pond to cool off, not realizing that the nymph was still on the prowl. Hermaphroditus was taken by surprise when the aquatic nymph jumped on him. The young man could not escape from Salmacis, for water was the natural element of the naiad nymphs. The nymph asked the gods that she and the young man become one, becoming united forever. The gods accepted her request, and the bodies of Salmacis and Hermaphroditus started to join together. The nymph and the young man now shared the same body, blending male and female features. This new intersex being was misunderstood by other people. For this reason, Hermaphroditus was viewed with suspicion and felt great shame.
Tithonus was a handsome Trojan prince, brother of King Priam of Troy. By chance, he met the beautiful goddess of the dawn, Aurora. The goddess and the young human immediately fell in love. But Aurora was worried that Tithonus was immortal, preventing them from living together forever. She then asked Zeus to make him immortal. Aurora got her wish, but forgot to ask for the gift of eternal youth. so Tithonus continued to age. Tithonus could only speak like a baby when he was 150 years old. Many centuries passed, and Aurora locked her husband in a room. Tithonus was still alive, but all that remained of him was a dried-up husk of the man he used to be. The blessing of living forever had turned into a curse.
Tyndareus reigned over Sparta and was indebted for his crown to Hercules, who had killed his brother when he had attempted to seize the Spartan throne. The Spartan king then went on to marry a beautiful princess named Leda. She was so gorgeous that she attracted Zeus's interest, and he began to lust for the young queen. Leda was cooling off one day on the shore of a stream as she watched a beautiful swan ballet across the water. The girl was delighted with the creature's loveliness. Suddenly, an eagle plunged its pointed talons into the swan. The beautiful bird evaded the assault, swiftly moving closer to the young queen, who protected him. Leda enjoyed touching the bird's soft feathers and plumes, but the naive princess had no idea that this handsome swan was actually Zeus transformed into a fowl. The great swan-shaped god bonded with the young queen and sowed his divine seed into her. After the bird left, Leda was still overcome with desire and sought out Tyndareus, her husband, with whom she had a night of passionate love. The queen became pregnant, and, to everyone's surprise, she laid 2 eggs. Helen and Pollux, Zeus's children, were born from one of them, and Castor and Clytemnestra, Tyndareus's children, were born from the other. The king made no distinction between the babies and brought them all up as his legitimate children. His offspring would leave their mark on Greek mythology. Clytemnestra would then marry Agamemnon, the greatest of all the Greek kings. Castor and Pollux would become part of Jason's crew that would set out on the adventure in search of the Golden Fleece. Meanwhile, Helen would become the world's most beautiful woman and would be sought after by almost all the Greek kings, and her kidnapping would be the trigger for the start of the Trojan War.
Hephaestus, god of forges, had berated his wife Aphrodite after catching her red-handed having an extramarital affair with Ares, the god of war. The god took a long time to recover from such a humiliation. To alleviate his pain, he began to focus exclusively on work. At this time, the Trojan War had broken out, and Athena, goddess of strategic warfare, went to Hephaestus's forge with an order for new weapons and armor. Hephaestus was a magnificent blacksmith, and Athena enjoyed visiting his workshop to watch the making of the weapons that were true works of art. The god of the forges enjoyed the visits of the beautiful and haughty goddess of wisdom, who illuminated Hephaestus's forge with her splendor and lessened the loneliness of the blacksmith deity. Poseidon, god of the seas and Athena's rival, seeing the friendship between the gods, decided to stir up an argument between them. The sea god poked Hephaestus, saying that Athena had an interest in a love affair with the god of the forges. But Athena had no intention of having an affair with anyone, for she had taken a vow of chastity and wished to remain pure for all eternity. Upon hearing this false account, Hephaestus was thrilled. After all, one of the most beautiful goddesses of Olympus wanted to be with him. When the goddess decided to pay another visit, Hephaestus, consumed by lust, tried to seduce her, but Athena rejected him. However, the god was beset by desire and tried to conquer her through force. The god grabbed the virgin goddess, but the deity of war pushed him away. However, Hephaestus had already poured out his divine seed. The goddess disgustingly shoved the god of forges back, throwing him to the ground. Hephaestus's divine seed fell to the earth and was taken up by Gaia, who subsequently gave birth to the fruit of this mishap. The baby's name was Erichthonius, a strange creature with the trunk of a man and the tail of a serpent. Athena adopted Erichthonius as her own son. but the baby was not yet ready to live in the mortal world. So, Athena put him in a basket and gave the child to the princess of Athens, a city consecrated to the goddess after her feud with Poseidon. The goddess told them that they could never peek into the contents of the box, but the princess's curiosity was greater than their caution. They opened the box and found the creature. They became mad and threw themselves from the top of Athens' Acropolis. Athens returned for her son and raised him in the temple dedicated to the goddess. Under the guardianship of the deity of wisdom, Erichthonius became a wise and diligent adult. He was one of the legendary kings of Athens, with a prosperous regency. During his reign, the Greeks learned how to deal with money. Accordingly, the son of Athena went down in history as one of the best rulers of Attica.
After returning from a trip to India, Dionysus wandered around the world, teaching men to cultivate vines that had the sweet grapes as their fruit. These were used to produce wine, a drink considered almost divine because of its connection to this god. But while the young god was strolling along the seashore, he was spotted by a band of pirates. When they saw the handsome young man in a purple robe, they had no doubt that he was the son of a king or a wealthy nobleman. The pirates surrounded Dionysus, who offered no resistance, and forced him into the pirate ship. The captain ordered the god to be tied to the main mast, where he was to remain until a large ransom was paid by his family. But to the pirates' surprise, even the most complex and intricate knots untied themselves. The captain ordered Dionysus to sit quietly by the mast under the watch of his men. The old helmsman warned the captain that the slack knots was a divine sign that the young man should be freed, but the captain ignored him. Dionysus had enough and decided to act. The wind ceased, and the sails of the boat became useless. When the sailors put their oars in the water, they turned into thick vines. And miraculously, it began to rain wine to the sailors' astonishment. When the pirates looked at Dionysus, his eyes glowed like fire. Vines spread throughout the ship from the god's body. The god summoned on board a leopard, which let out a terrible roar, terrifying the pirates. In panic, the sailors jumped into the sea. When they touched the waters, they suffered a metamorphosis and turned into dolphins. Dionysus spared the old helmsman, for he proved to be God-fearing. This is the story of how the god of wine transformed a band of pirates into a new species of dolphin. Clytie was a beautiful nymph in love with Helios, the sun god. They had a relationship, but the sun god saw nothing special in the nymph and abandoned her. Even after being rejected, Clytie spent her days contemplating her sweetheart as he crossed the skies during the day. She did nothing else and began to wither away after so many days of just following the motion of the sun. The forsaken nymph eventually passed away, but the gods did not allow her, out of love for the sun, to be forgotten. In her final resting place, beautiful yellow flowers appeared. Just like the nymph Clytie, they were always turned towards the sun while the god was crossing over it. This flower became known as the sunflower. Hyacinth was a young man of great beauty. His beauty was so immense that he even attracted two deities. One of them was Apollo, the god of music and prophecies. The other was Zephyrus, also known as the West Wind. Hyacinth was amused by Zephyrus. He flied across the sky alongside the god, piercing the clouds. With Apollo, the youngster rejoiced with the songs played by the brilliant god. The boy and the god became quite intimate. Hyacinth spent his days beside the god of music, doing all sorts of things. Realizing that he had been left out, Zephyrus started to nurture a great grief in his heart. One day, Apollo and Hyacinth decided to throw the discus. After preparing himself to throw it, Apollo launched the disc with incredible strength. The disc reached a stunning height. Hyacinth was ready to catch it, which descended at high speed. But the jealous Zephyrus blew the disc away, suddenly changing its trajectory. The disc fell to the ground, and after the rebound, hit Hyacinth's head with violence. Apollo ran to rescue the boy whom he treasured so much. The god tried to use his powers to save Hyacinth's life, but not even the mighty Apollo could change Hyacinth's fate, traced by the Moirai. The beautiful boy died in Apollo's arms. Beautiful flowers started to sprout where Hyacinth's blood drops fell. Apollo felt guilty for ending Hyacinth's life at the peak of his youth, and in tribute to his friend, the god wrote his most beautiful songs, which were also the saddest and most melancholic. But with the arrival of spring, the god rejoiced, because the beautiful flowers born of the young's blood reappeared, and these came to be known by the name of Hyacinth. Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, was a deity of great beauty and elegance. Her charm was so strong that she attracted Poseidon, the god of the seas. The goddess rejected the attempts of the sea god, who seemed determined to conquer her. To escape from Poseidon, the goddess took the form of a mare, but the god was the lord of horses and transformed himself into a stallion to pursue the goddess of fertility. Demeter was caught and taken by force. From this unwanted union, 2 offspring were born: the divine winged horse Arion and little Despina. Disgusted at having been raped, Demeter repudiated the child and left to purify herself in the river Ladon, where all sorrows could be forgotten. Poor Despina grew up without her mother's love, and the young goddess's heart was filled with great resentment. Unlike Despina, Persephone, Demeter's daughter with Zeus, was loved and spoiled by her mother. This saddened the neglected daughter enormously. When Persephone left to meet Hades in the underworld, Demeter was always saddened and neglected her duties as goddess of agriculture. Despina would take advantage of this moment to destroy her mother's work. She generated frost that ruined the crops, and during the winter, the snow made the fields barren. She also froze rivers, lakes, and inlets to punish her father. Even though she had an icy heart, she found a loving partner in Boreas, a deity who represents the icy north wind. When Persephone, the goddess of spring, returned after a period in the underworld, she saw that the flowers, which she had cultivated with so much love, had been destroyed. And this is how she learned of the existence of Despina, her sister. Persephone and Despina met, and despite being goddesses of opposite natures, there was no room for disagreement between the sisters. They became friends, even with opposite tasks. Despina, the goddess of winter, was traveling the world taken by her husband Boreas. He, with his icy wind, announced the arrival of the new season. Hebe, the goddess of youth, was the daughter of Zeus and Hera. She was also a deity connected with housework. One of her jobs was to be a cupbearer at the banquets on Mount Olympus. Hebe served the nectar of immortality to the gods. In a stroke of fate, one day Hebe stumbled and dropped all the sacred nectar. The other gods could not contain their laughter. But Zeus didn't like this at all, and decided to dismiss the goddess of youth from her role of serving the gods. Hera did not like Hebe being demoted from the nectar and ambrosia distribution. She warned Zeus not to choose one of his mistresses for Hebe's place. Zeus assured the goddess that no woman would take the place of the goddess of youth. Out of ideas, Zeus began watching the men, looking for someone capable of filling the open spot. Suddenly, he saw Ganymede, Prince of Troy, who was helping to shepherd the royal flocks. Ganymede had an almost divine beauty. Perhaps there had never been a mortal as beautiful as he was. Zeus decided that someone with such beauty was not meant to live among men. The presence of that gem would further enrich the abode of the gods. The supreme god took the form of an eagle and descended to earth to abduct the beautiful Ganymede. The eagle surreptitiously flew over the young man. After descending toward him, the great bird grabbed Ganymede by surprise. The beautiful young man was gently carried by the divine bird toward Mount Olympus. Ganymede stood before the gods of Olympus. They were impressed by the beauty of the mere mortal. Zeus presented him as a substitute for Hebe in the celestial banqueting duties. Ganymede had the prestigious responsibility of serving nectar and ambrosia to the gods. The young man was also given the gift of immortality, retaining his youthful beauty forever. Ganymede was highly regarded by the gods, who valued the excellent service provided by the young man. Only the goddess Hera was not particularly fond of the cupbearer. She was jealous of the long periods that Zeus spent with the handsome young man. But Zeus's wife was not the only disgruntled person. The king and queen of Troy were extremely saddened by their son's disappearance. To lessen the pain of Ganymede's parents, Zeus created the constellation Aquarius, represented by the figure of young Ganymede. As they looked up into the sky, the parents knew that their son was in an honored place beside the gods of Olympus.
Kairos is a time-related Greek deity, as opposed to Cronus, who is considered the god of time. Kairos is considered the deity of opportune time, or the right moment. This is why he is also considered the god of opportunity. The Greeks used to believe that everything had its right time to happen, but major opportunities happen only a few times in life, and they can pass very quickly. Kairos had a long top knot, while the rest of his head was hairless. For this reason, the ancient Greeks believed that, when the god came along with a great opportunity, one ought to seize it immediately. If you let the opportunity pass by, you cannot grab it, and the great opening will be lost forever.
Atalanta is a heroine from Greek mythology, but when she was little, her father wanted to have only male children, and she was abandoned in a forest. The little girl was left at the mercy of the beasts, in a fate that seemed terrible. But surprisingly, she ended up taken in and raised by a bear, along with 2 cubs. When she was still a child, she was found by hunters, who decided to raise her from then on. From a young age, Atalanta showed an innate talent for hunting. She joined the hunting pack that followed the goddess Artemis. Atalanta's father, regretting having acted incorrectly against his only daughter, asked her for forgiveness. The young girl went on to attend her father's court. Her father, Sconius, king of Cadmes, was very proud of his daughter. She was known to be faster than a roe deer. Atalanta became even more famous after attending the Caledonian boar hunt. This ended tragically with Meleager's death. After this event, Atalanta was given a prophecy. If she were to marry, her life would go into ruin. But Atalanta was beautiful and the daughter of a king. She had hundreds of suitors. Her father, fearing his daughter's fate, prepared a plan to protect her. Whoever beat Atalanta in a race could marry his daughter. But if the suitor lost, he would have to pay for his defeat with his life. Despite the heavy penalty in case of defeat, many put their lives on the line to marry Atalanta, but they all died. After the demise of so many suitors, the king believed that his daughter was safe. But there was still a young man named Hippomenes. He was known for running very fast. Atalanta had met him already and knew that he could run at a faster speed than she could. But she also knew that he was unable to maintain that speed for very long. The young Hippomenes was in love with the beautiful Atalanta. At the temple of the goddess of love, he asked Aphrodite for help to seduce the young woman. The goddess appeared with golden apples and gave him instructions to follow during the race. It was time for the contest. The couple prepared for the start. Hippomenes took the lead, but Atalanta was not worried. She knew that the young man would not be able to keep up the pace for long. Hippomenes began to lose speed, and Atalanta was about to overtake him. At this moment, Hippomenes took out of his bag a golden apple, which caught the girl's attention. He dropped one of the apples on the ground. Atalanta, impressed by such a precious thing, bent down to pick it up. The young man managed to distance himself, but after picking up the apple, Atalanta ran even faster. The finish line was near, but Atalanta drew closer to Hippomenes, quick as an arrow. Just as Hippomenes was about to be overtaken, he dropped another apple. Atalanta could not resist the urge and bent down to pick up the fruit. Hippomenes crossed the finish line first. Fulfilling his promise, the king gave his daughter's hand to Hippomenes. Hippomenes and Atalanta got married, but, contrary to the prophecy, everything seemed to go well. However, the couple forgot to thank the goddess Aphrodite for allowing that union, and the deity did not like ungrateful people. The goddess decided to punish them and fostered lust in the couple. Unable to control their instincts, they had sex inside the temple dedicated to Rhea, mother of Zeus. Furious at such a lack of respect, Rhea, the powerful Titan, turned the beautiful couple into lions. As punishment, Atalanta and Hippomenes were destined to pull the glorious chariot of Rhea, the glorious mother of the Olympian gods.
In one ancient Greek kingdom, at a time when the gods still roamed among mortals, 3 beautiful princesses dreamed what their future husbands would look like.
Mine will be very rich and will cover me with the finest silk and the most beautiful jewels. My husband will be a famous general, and he will show me as his most remarkable achievement. And you, Psyche, what will your husband look like? All I want is a love that will lift my spirit. So cheesy.
The 2 sisters were beautiful, but Psyche was certainly the most beautiful, so beautiful that she attracted everyone's eyes, making her sisters jealous. People from faraway kingdoms traveled long distances just to gaze at the famous princess.
Behold, the most beautiful creature who ever set foot on earth!
Psyche was worshipped as a true deity, and the tributes previously paid to Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, were now addressed to the young and beautiful princess. The offended goddess, caught in anger, watched the parade that followed the princess, while her temple was empty. Aphrodite gathered her son, Eros, the god of love and passion.
Dear son, this mortal who thinks she is on the same level as the gods must be punished. Through your arrows, make Psyche fall in love with the hideous creature.
As night fell, Eros went to the royal palace and stealthily entered Psyche's room. Psyche was sleeping in her bed. Curiously, Eros approached the princess to see if she was really that beautiful. The god was overwhelmed, as the beauty of Psyche was truly splendid.
The fact that my mother is jealous of this mortal being is no coincidence. Her beauty can eclipse the most beautiful among the nymphs and goddess.
In an unexpected turn of events, Psyche turned in her sleep, and this movement disoriented Eros, who accidentally wounded himself with his own weapon. The wounded god instantly fell in love with the young and beautiful mortal, and because of his love, Eros failed to accomplish the mission that would have caused harm to Psyche. Psyche carried on her life normally and did not even suspect what had happened. But there was something strange going on. Time passed, and although she was the most beautiful and most beloved, Psyche was still single, while her sisters had several suitors.
Psyche, you have always been adored by everyone, But you are still single, while our sister and I are already happily married to the noblest of men.
Don't worry, daughter of mine. Your beauty may be overwhelming to some men, but soon a suitor worthy of your heart will appear.
But the king was indeed very much worried about his daughter's situation. The king was unaware that the lack of suitors was because Eros refused to awaken the love for Psyche in any man, since he was in love with the girl. He went to the Oracle of Delphi in his quest for answers. Inside, through a pythoness, the god Apollo pronounced himself.
Your daughter will marry a perverse, winged being who is delighted to wound mortals and gods. The princess shall be left on the edge of the abyss in matrimonial attire, where she shall be delivered to this terrible creature who will cause her death.
Apollo was referencing Eros, the god of love. The solar god harbored a great resentment for Eros, since he had made the god of music have non-requited loves. The king left the temple in tears, as he was resistant to the idea of losing his favorite daughter. But the envious sisters of Psyche insisted that he was to obey the orientations of the oracle.
You must sacrifice Psyche, or you will draw the ire of the gods, and woe to our kingdom!
The king then revealed the sorrowful fate of his daughter.
My beloved daughter, by the will of the gods we will deliver you to a terrible fate. Your beauty has become a curse.
The princess was led into the abyss by a bridal procession, which resembled a funeral procession. Psyche, hearing her parents' lamentation, did not hold back.
Why do they now bemoan my fate? A short while ago they rejoiced, proudly, to see me being adored like a goddess, while they knew the sacrilege that was being perpetuated. Now carry me up the cliff, and let me meet my dismal fate.
Psyche was abandoned on the edge of the abyss, in expectation of her terrible husband. A breeze started to lift Psyche towards the sky. This wind was the god Zephyr, also known as the West Wind. The princess levitated in the sky towards her destiny. After being swept away by Zephyr, Psyche awoke in an idyllic place. Flowers spread everywhere, and a delicious scent perspired the air. A beautiful palace featuring the whitest marble stood out in the landscape. Psyche climbed the stairs that led to the entrance of the palace, bewildered by all the wealth that surrounded her. The place was made of striking luxury, where there was no shortage of adornments covered in gold and silver. As she entered the palace, she heard a soft voice, but could not tell where it came from.
My lady, everything you see now belongs to you, and we are at your disposal to assist you in anything you wish.
There was no one around her, but the young woman understood that these were invisible servants. They helped her in the bath, at meals, and sang and played beautiful songs.
Now you shall go to your room and wait for the arrival of our master.
And what is your master like? They say he's a monster.
Some have mentioned him that way, but in fact he's not evil, just volatile.
Already in her room, Psyche, distressed, was waiting for her fate. The cloak of Nyx, the goddess of the night, had already fully clothed the skies. The room was in utter darkness, and it was impossible to see any shape, when Psyche felt that something had crept in through the window. The lady felt the presence of her new husband, and could feel his breath on her neck. The young woman was tense and had no idea what would happen. Against her expectations, she had a night of sublime pleasure, and her new husband treated her with much love and affection. When she awakened in the morning, her husband had already left, and due to the darkness of the previous night, she could not have any glimpse of her companion. Psyche spent the day getting to know the facilities of her new residence, but she kept thinking about when she would find that mysterious creature again. The night arrived, and Psyche was already waiting for her husband. The couple met and loved each other on countless nights. On one of those, Psyche couldn't resist and asked,
My love, Why do you always hide in the shadows? I would so much like to know how you really are.
Isn't the love we share enough? All I'm asking is that you don't try to see me. In the darkness, we are equals.
I'm sorry if I annoyed you. That wasn't my intention.
Psyche decided to respect her husband's request and stopped touching the subject. Time passed, and despite being very happy, Psyche missed her family.
Husband of mine, I miss my family so much, and it hurts my heart to know that they think I am dead. I beg you to let me visit her.
Eros accepted Psyche's request because, according to his thoughts, if she decided to return after having been released, that would be the ultimate proof of her genuine love.
My beloved daughter, I thought I would never see you again.
Psyche's relatives were surprised with the girl's return, whom they thought they would never see again. And the return was triumphant. Psyche was adorned with the most beautiful jewels. She looked like the richest of queens.
How is your life with your mysterious husband?
It couldn't be more wonderful. He is sweet and does everything to please me.
Her jealous sisters did not believe the stories Psyche told while she distributed beautiful gifts to her relatives.
Everything about our sister tends to be too much. I don't think everything she says is really that gorgeous.
You don't have to believe me. Come with me, and you can see for yourself.
Zephyr, the wind from the west, led Psyche and her sisters to the heavenly palace. When they got there, they realized that everything their sister had said was true. But this only made her sisters more jealous. The envious sisters decided to poison Psyche's relationship.
I know that everything seems wonderful, but don't you remember what the oracle said? You married a monster, and he will be responsible for your death.
Do this. When you sense that he is sleeping, take a knife, turn on a light, and after seeing the monster, cut his throat!
Her sisters departed, but seeds of distrust had been planted in Psyche's heart. The night came, and her husband was already asleep beside her. The young woman took a knife and lit a lamp. As she approached her bed, Psyche realized that this was not a monster, but a young man with divine beauty. The young woman moved closer to contemplate her husband's breathtaking beauty, and concluded that he could only be a god. But a drop of hot oil accidentally fell from the lamp, and it hit Eros' chest, who awoke, frightened by the burn. And he faced Psyche, wielding the knife.
How can you be such a fool? Is this how you repay my love? Thinking that I'm a monster and wanting to slash my throat?
Forgive me, my love. I know I made a mistake, but we can make this right.
I only asked you one thing, and you couldn't do it. And so you'll never see me again.
Eros flew out the window. Psyche jumped after him but couldn't reach him and hit the ground. The fall injuries were light, but her heart was utterly broken. When they heard that Psyche had returned, her sisters ran to the cliff, hoping that they would be blown away by the west wind. Zephyr began to blow, and the sisters threw themselves into his arms. But he did not seize them, letting them fall from the cliff. The poor Psyche began to help with the tasks of the goddess Demeter's temple. In Demeter's temple, Psyche accomplished all of her tasks with utmost dedication. But all this work was not enough to make the young woman stop thinking about her lost love. The goddess Demeter showed her pity for the poor girl and decided to help her.
Poor Psyche. I feel sorry for your pain. So I give her the following advice. Go to Aphrodite's temple and offer yourself to the goddess with humility and submission. Then you will soften the goddess's wrath, and perhaps you will be able to win back her love.
Who am I not to follow the advice of such a wise and benevolent goddess?
Psyche went to the goddess of love's temple, and she had no idea how she would be welcomed by the former mother-in-law. The young woman was met with great distrust by Aphrodite.
What is the most obnoxious and disloyal of creatures who have walked on this earth doing in my temple?
I humbly throw myself down before the goddess of love, and put myself at her service in search of forgiveness.
Do you believe that you will be forgiven easily by me, after robbing my honors and hurting my son? To purge your sins will be very painful, and you will have to do the most difficult jobs, which may cost you your own life.
I will do anything to at least have a small chance to get your forgiveness and win back my love.
Aphrodite chose to burden Psyche with painful tasks. As a first assignment, Psyche would then have to go to the grain barn and separate the different varieties, which were thoroughly mixed. The difficulty of such a task would have overwhelmed even Hercules. The god Eros, who secretly observed everything, made ants help Psyche in her task. This way, the young woman accomplished her work in record time. Aphrodite was angered to see the work accomplished so quickly.
I don't know how you managed to accomplish this task so easily, but the next one won't be so straightforward.
Psyche was supposed to bring Aphrodite a good handful of golden wool from dangerous sheep. These were no ordinary animals, since, besides having the golden wool, they were also enthusiasts of human flesh. The sheep passed through a narrow trail between thorny plants, and part of their wool ended up sticking to the thorns. Psyche collected the wool that was left between the thorns and presented the golden threads to the goddess.
Well done. But do not think it's over.
The goddess of beauty then demanded that the young woman bring her a jug of water from the source of the Styx River, which is located on top of a mountain. The task was seemingly impossible to achieve, but Zeus ordered his eagle to collect the water from the source and deliver it to Psyche, and so one more job was accomplished.
I admit that you have been able to accomplish these tasks by conquering the mercy of the gods, but your next job will have a price that only you can pay. The hassle you've caused me has exhausted my beauty, so I demand you go to the kingdom of Hades and ask Queen Persephone to fill this box with beauty so I can restore my splendor. And then you shall have my forgiveness and blessing to reunite with my son again.
Psyche knew now that her end was near, and she knew of no other way to enter the underworld than to take her own life. The young woman was ready to jump from the top of a tower when she heard a voice like a ghost.
There's another way. I'll tell you the route and how you can overcome the obstacles known as Charon the ferryman and Cerberus, the three-headed dog. But when you come back, don't ever open the box in any situation.
Following the guidance of the mysterious voice, she found a cave that would take her to the underworld. After a lengthy descent, she reached the banks of the Acheron River, and there she met Charon.
I serve the goddess Aphrodite and have an audience with Queen Persephone, who awaits me.
She gave 2 coins to the boatman Charon as payment. So she crossed the River of Souls toward the domains of Hades. Psyche introduced herself to the king and queen of the underworld, Hades and Persephone.
What does a mortal do in our domains?
I'm here at the service of Aphrodite, who asks you to fill this box with some of your beauty so that she can restore hers.
Persephone gave the box back to her, which was now much heavier, and Psyche set out on her way out of the underworld. Psyche came across Cerberus, preventing her passage. However, she had taken with her, guided by the mysterious voice, barley and honey bread, soaked with a sleeping pill. She offered it to the dog, who fell asleep, and so Psyche proceeded to the surface. As the boatman made his return trip, the young woman saw her own reflection in the waters, and she noticed how all this work had made her look tired. Psyche started the ascent to the surface, and she would soon finish her last mission.
This box is nearly overflowing with beauty. It won't hurt me to take just a little bit for myself. And like this, when I find my love again, I will be beautiful and glowing for him.
Psyche opened the box, and out of it came a black mist. As she absorbed the mist, Psyche started to faint, and life began to leave her body. Eros felt that something had happened to his love and went to rescue her. When he found Psyche, she was cold as a cadaver. Thanatos, the embodiment of death, was already beside the girl's body. Using his powers, Eros lifted the mortal mist from her beloved's body and put it back in the box. Psyche awoke in Eros's arms and said,
My love, I feel now that I can finally look you in the eyes without risking losing you.
Then the couple kissed passionately. Eros instructed Psyche to finish her work, handing the box to Aphrodite. In the meantime, the god of love flew to Mount Olympus, where he begged Zeus to convince Aphrodite to allow the couple to bond. Eros led Psyche to Mount Olympus. All the gods were waiting for her there. And from the hands of Zeus himself, and with Aphrodite's blessing, she received the nectar and ambrosia, divine foods that bestowed immortality.
Psyche, her path was thorny, but ultimately you managed to complete your quest. Now you are immortal and free from the obstacles created by men's ignorance. And the bond that binds you and your husband will never be breached, and this love will persist for all eternity.
From the union of Eros and Psyche was born Hedon, the deity of pleasure, and the love of the couple lasted forever. A queen bee went to Mount Olympus to pay homage to Zeus. As an offering, she brought honeycombs of exceptional quality. Zeus was pleased with the bee for that fantastic offering, and said he would grant her one wish. The bee stated that her honey was very coveted, and she wished for a weapon to take revenge on the thieves. Zeus gave the bees their painful sting. But first, the god warned the bee. After using the stinger, she would die. After all, he who acts out of revenge and wishes evil is rewarded with that same evil in return. Lamia is a chimeric creature from Greek mythology. The figure of the serpent-tailed woman instilled fear in ancient times. She was known to attack and devour children who crossed her path. But Lamia may not always have been like this. She had once been a beautiful queen, daughter of Poseidon, reigning over the Libyan region. Her beauty was such that she attracted Zeus's attention, the supreme god of Olympus, and she became Zeus's lover. With the god, the queen had several children, which aroused the fury of the goddess Hera, wife of Zeus. The goddess ruthlessly took revenge on the beautiful queen. Hera killed all of Lamia's children. In some versions, the goddess caused the mother herself to devour her children, and was then terribly cursed. The young girl was transformed into a creature half woman, half serpent, that fed on children and young people. As if this were not enough, the goddess still made it so that Lamia could not close her eyes. The image of the death of her children was always present, and she would not be able to rest. But Zeus, feeling sorry for the cursed creature, allowed her to remove her eyes so she could finally sleep for a while. Over time, the myth of Lamia changed, and she came to be identified as a vampiric creature. Through seduction, Lamia would lure young men to her bed to feed on their blood. Medieval folklore turned Lamia into a kind of boogie woman. Her story was told to frighten children. Despite being a figure that has lost relevance over the centuries, Lamia still arouses fear and fascination. Niobe was the powerful queen of Thebes, married to Amphion, son of Zeus, and an amazing musician. She was the daughter of Tantalus, a man who dared to serve human flesh to the gods. His offspring was cursed, and Niobe would meet a terrible fate. Niobe had 7 children. They were so strong, athletic, and beautiful that they looked like the children of Ares and Aphrodite. The queen also had 7 beautiful daughters, who delighted those who looked at them, resembling true nymphs. Niobe was enormously proud of her children. This immoderate feeling was the reason for her ruin. One day, a priestess from Apollo's temple asked the people to participate in a sacrificial ceremony to honor the goddess Leto, mothers of the gods Apollo and Artemis. The proud queen did the unthinkable. She interrupted the priestess and said that, if the goal was to worship and honor someone, then she should be the focus, and not the goddess Leto. She boasted that she was queen of one of Greece's most important kingdoms. On the contrary, Leto was a wandering deity, who only found shelter on the island of Delos thanks to the mercy of the gods. While Leto had only 2 children, Apollo and Artemis, the queen had given birth to 14, all so splendid that, according to Niobe, they could live on Olympus among the gods. She told them to forget about Leto and focus all their tributes on the Queen of Thebes. Far away from there, Leto was consoled by Artemis after suffering the enormous humiliation, but her children would not allow such an outrage against the gods to go unpunished. Apollo and Artemis's revenge would be relentless. Using his divine bow, Apollo initiated the payback. With terrible arrows, he went about slaughtering Niobe's male children. All 7 sons of the Queen of Thebes fell after being struck by the shining god's arrows. Niobe was horrified to see all her sons dead and fallen at her feet. But this punishment was not enough to make the queen understand that a mortal cannot compare herself to the gods. Niobe, even after losing her 7 male children, said that she was still superior to Leto, for she had 7 magnificent daughters, while the goddess had only 1. So Artemis carried out the god's vengeance on the insolent mortal. With sharp blows, she slaughtered Niobe's 7 daughters. The proud queen lost the 14 children of whom she was so proud. Her arrogance brought her on par with the gods. It was said that Niobe was turned into a rock, and that even in this mineral form, the queen continued to shed tears down the stone. Momus is the personification of satire in Greek mythology, and was also the son of Nyx. He was known for his sharp tongue, uttering the harshest critiques and mockery. One day, Momus was invited to judge the works of the gods. Poseidon had created the bull, and Momus told him that he was a fool for not putting the horns below its eyes. This would have allowed the animal to see where its horns were pointing. Athena had created the first house, and Momus criticized it, saying that if it had wheels, it could be taken anywhere along with its owner. He also criticized Hephaestus for creating Pandora without a visible heart so that men could understand her feelings. He also commented on Zeus's infidelity to Hera, as he seduced goddesses and mortals. Zeus expelled him from Olympus, because he who has no talents only knows how to criticize what others do. The ancient Greek fable recounts that a cat eventually became deeply in love with its owner. The cat wanted nothing more than to be made into a real woman. She went to Aphrodite's temple to pray to the goddess of love, asking the goddess to fulfill her wish. Aphrodite was moved by the love this cat had for his owner and decided to help her. The goddess of love turned the cat into a beautiful young woman, so beautiful that no man could resist. The boy immediately fell in love with the woman-shaped cat, and it wouldn't be long before they were married. On their wedding night, however, Aphrodite brought a mouse into the couple's quarters to see if the cat's makeover had been complete. Instead of screaming as expected of any woman, the girl began to chase the rat. She jumped on it and took it, but the worst was yet to come. The girl gobbled up the rat with sheer voracity, much to her husband's astonishment. Aphrodite understood the mistake she had made. Some people may change their appearance, but they don't lose their old habits. Castor and Pollux were twin brothers. They were the sons of Leda, queen of Sparta, who had been visited by a swan-shaped Zeus. She gave birth to both brothers. Pollux was the son of Zeus and was born immortal. Castor was the son of King Tyndareus of Sparta. Castor became an accomplished horse driver, while his brother was an outstanding boxer. The twins were inseparable and took part in many adventures. The most famous include the hunt of the Caledonian boar, the rescue of Helen from Theseus's hands, and they were also Argonauts. It was there that they became friends with the brothers Lynceus and Idas, two famous heroes of that time. But these pairs of brothers became rivals due to an unresolved dispute. The animosities between them increased when Castor and Pollux kidnapped the rivals' sisters. Castor ended up mortally wounded by Idas, who was trying to rescue his sisters. He agonized in Pollux's arms, who was heartbroken to realize that his brother's life was fading away. Pollux pleaded with his divine father for help, and Zeus went to meet him. He asked the supreme god to bring his beloved brother back to life, but Zeus said that was impossible. Castor was a mere mortal, and his spirit belonged to Hades. Pollux said he would give his own life so that he could be by his brother's side. But this was also unfeasible, for he was immortal. Zeus and Pollux found a solution so that the brothers would not be separated. Castor and Pollux would spend half the year together in the kingdom of Hades, and the other half among the immortal gods. In the heavens, the sky gods honored the brave and inseparable brothers through the constellation of Gemini.